Chapter 530. Bai Meng glanced at his master's expression and slowly retreated. Yu Qianqiu has already broken through to the early stage of tribulation passing. Interesting. Hua Zhongming patted Pu Taidong's shoulder and looked back at the crowd. What do you think? Pu Taidong came back to his senses and said in a daze. In that case, the person talking to this little cultivator might really be Yu Qianqiu? His gaze swept across the crowd. Even if it's Yu Qianqiu, you don't really think there's a treasure left behind by the demon lord of thousand swords in the misty forest, do you? Everyone was silent. There was still some doubt in this matter. They were all thinking about something. Have you heard of a place? The one who spoke was Tsang Yuan State's Miao Han Yuan. Everyone looked at him, waiting for him to continue. Miao Han Yuan lightly said, Immortal Ascension Stage. What? Someone couldn't help but exclaim. Most of the people present were at a loss. They were unfamiliar with this term, but there were a few who were moved. Pu Taidong looked around and frowned. Miao Han Yuan, what are you trying to say? Don't talk in riddles. Miao Han Yuan glanced at the expressionless Hua Zhongming. I'm sure Brother Hua has heard of this place. Hua Zhongming smiled disapprovingly and didn't say anything. Sikong Ju, who was standing in the crowd, slowly walked out with his hands in his sleeves. I've heard of this place from my master. Legend has it that in ancient times, when cultivators reached a certain level, they would ascend to the immortal world through a place called the Immortal Ascension Stage. However, this is only a legend. No one knows where it is. Is the Immortal Ascension Stage that Lord Miao is talking about the one I'm talking about? Hehe. As expected of Yin Baikong's brilliant disciple. You're really knowledgeable. Miao Hanyuan sneered. I happened to read a record in an ancient book. It says that a certain place is paved with countless gold bricks. In the middle, there's a platform built with gold. This platform is called the Immortal Ascension Stage. Cultivators whose cultivation surpasses the soul formation stage can ascend to the immortal world. Brother Hua, am I right? Hua Zhongming chuckled. He knew he couldn't hide it any longer, so he said, I also thought it was strange. If the person talking to that little cultivator was really Yu Qianqiu, then why is the ancient tomb that Yu Qianqiu mentioned so similar to the legendary Immortal Ascension Stage? The floor is also paved with golden bricks, and there is also a golden platform in the middle. Could it be a coincidence? The Immortal Ascension Stage is hidden in the fog forest? Pu Taidong asked in surprise. Miao Hanyuan narrowed his eyes and said, In my opinion, if this Immortal Ascension Stage really exists, I'm afraid it's either in the East Holy Land or in the dense fog forest. Everyone nodded in agreement. In this world, only these two places hid secrets that were not known to outsiders. For a moment, everyone fell silent, each with their own ulterior motives. Although there was no confirmation, everyone was certain that the person was Yu Qianqiu. Moreover, the theory that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's golden body was hidden in the Immortal Ascension Stage was very believable. However, even if that was the case, who had the ability to enter the dense fog forest? The only thing they could do now was to capture Yu Qianqiu and force him to reveal the secret of how he could enter and exit the dense fog forest at will. The group of people with ulterior motives took their leave. When there were only 5 people who were on good terms with Pu Taidong left, Hua Zhongming frowned and said, Miao Hanyuan, what the hell are you doing? What he was implying was, why are you forcing me to tell everyone the truth? After Pu Taidong and the others understood the truth, they also gave Miao Hanyuan a questioning look. This didn't make sense. The Myriad Swords Demon Lord's 10,000 flying swords were enough for the 6 of us to share. Why did you have to make it known to the entire cultivation world? Wasn't this just looking for trouble? Miao Hanyuan glanced at them and sneered. We weren't the only ones who heard that little cultivator's words. Do you think you can keep this secret to yourself? It won't be long before the entire cultivation world knows. The Myriad Swords Demon Lord's treasures are a huge temptation. Whoever stands at the heart of the struggle will be unlucky. The 5 of us can't withstand such a huge lightning bolt. So let those who are capable go. The more chaotic the better. We'd better stick together and watch from the side. There's no hurry. When the others heard this, they understood and nodded their heads in understanding. Miao Hanyuan looked at Hua Zhongming and Pu Taidong and said, It's better for you two to bear your grudges for now. Preserving your strength is the best strategy. When the time comes, it will definitely be of great use." The two of them nodded in agreement. Then, the six of them began to make plans. Yu Qianqiu had witnessed the fall of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's golden body in the dense fog forest, as well as the legendary Immortal Ascension stage. This matter quickly spread throughout the cultivation world. Even the story of that little cultivator was made public by people with intentions. This matter spread like wildfire, and the cultivators of the various countries were in an uproar. Everyone understood that not just anyone could enter the dense fog forest, but Yu Qianqiu could come and go as he pleased. Now, whoever could find Yu Qianqiu and unravel the secret of entering and leaving the dense fog forest could possibly obtain the treasures left behind by the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. The World Commerce Association even offered a reward of 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Whoever could provide information on Yu Qianqiu and lead the World Commerce Association to find Yu Qianqiu would be able to obtain the 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Of course, whether or not they could catch him was the World Commerce Association's business. As long as the information provided was useful, they could obtain the reward. This time, it was lively. The World Commerce Association had used their powerful financial resources to set up informants in the entire cultivation world. Those cultivators with low cultivation could only dream about the treasures of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. No one thought they could obtain them. However, the reward of 100 million high-grade spirit stones was something that anyone could hope to obtain. For a moment, the various countries were filled with low-level cultivators scurrying around with dreams of getting rich. The cornucopia gathering, which was originally ranked 8th in the cultivation world, was moved back to 9th place. Now, the 8th major event was that the various countries were looking for Yu Qianqiu in order to obtain the treasures left behind by the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. The Jinshan country could be said to be in the eye of this matter, because the last time Yu Qianqiu appeared, he was in the Jinshan country. Moreover, the dense fog forest was also within the borders of the Jinshan country. Who dared to say that Yu Qianqiu himself did not want to obtain the treasures left behind by the Myriad Swords Demon Lord? It was said that it was only because his cultivation was not high enough that he could not obtain it. Presumably he was still thinking of a way. Therefore, the chances of finding Yu Qianqiu within the borders of the Jinshan country was the highest. Those cultivators with low cultivation often traveled in groups of 3 to 5. It was precisely because of their low cultivation that they formed groups for safety. At this time, Yu Qianqiu also joined a team of 3 people looking for Yu Qianqiu as a rogue cultivator. In order to dream of getting rich, the 3 people wandered everywhere within the borders of the Jinshan country. Among the 3 people, 2 of them were only at the middle stage of foundation establishment, so Yu Qianqiu claimed to be at the early stage of core formation and showed a little of his skill, subduing the other 2 and becoming the leader of the group of 3. The capital of the Jinshan country, Gold Casting City. In the wilderness dozens of miles north of the city, there was a large connected villa. This villa was originally built by a wealthy businessman for leisure purposes. Later, because it was ransacked by bandits, the entire villa's several hundred people were all killed, and it became an inauspicious place. Coupled with the frequent haunting, this place became the famous Ghost Manor. In fact, the so-called haunting was just a prank made by some rogue cultivators who had nowhere to stay. But over time, the reputation of the Ghost Manor spread, and mortals would definitely keep a respectful distance. Therefore, this place was occupied by rogue cultivators from all over the country. Of course, there was no lack of cultivators with backgrounds from various countries temporarily resting. Chapter 531. Yu Qianqiu's group of 3 also came to the Ghost Manor because of its fame. The so-called fame was just an excuse that Yu Qianqiu used to fool the other 2. In reality, it was because he knew that this place was a good place to gather information. The other 2 didn't have any objections. During this period of time, they followed Yu Qianqiu and ate well, and had a lot of fun. Moreover, whenever they encountered a little trouble, the boss could always easily solve it. The two felt that it was good to continue living like this. No one expected to meet Yu Qianqiu and become rich. In short, their lives were much better than before. They no longer had to be timid because of their low cultivation. Boss would take care of everything, and they only needed to be obedient and run errands. The ghost manor was surrounded by mountains and rivers. Under the lush green mountains, there was a small bridge beside the flowing water. It occupied an area of more than 100 mu and had a grand layout. This kind of livable place was rare in the entire Golden Mountain country. It could be seen that the owner, who built it, was indeed rich. However, from the peeling paint on the walls and the old marks that were covered with moss, one could see that it lacked maintenance. The three of them landed in the center of the ghost manor on their flying swords. They looked around and saw groups of loose cultivators bragging. Seeing that someone had come, those loose cultivators only glanced at them and continued to brag. No one paid attention to them. It was Yu Qianqiu's first time here. He thought that this place was in disrepair and should be dilapidated. He didn't expect that the inside would be so tidy. The seedlings and flower beds that were scattered around were lush and green. Not even a single weed could be seen. It was obvious that someone had been taking care of it. "Boss, let's go see if there are any empty rooms." The one who spoke was called Qin Jiaxing. The other one was called Fu Chun. Yu Qianqiu looked around and waved his hand, indicating that they should go ahead and look around. It was clearly not their first time here. They greeted each other and went out of the east and west gates of the garden. They were very familiar with the way. Yu Qianqiu was no longer called Yu Qianqiu, but Niu Yud. His face was no longer his original face. He had put on another human skin mask. Back when he was in Shirwenguang's military camp, he had prepared a few masks in advance, as if he had a premonition that they would come in handy. A one-armed old man in the garden caught Yu Qianqiu's attention. His hair and beard were white, and he wore a gray robe with an empty left sleeve pinned to his belt. The old man looked old, but his back was straight. He was controlling a flying sword with one hand to prune the weeds and plants in the garden. He looked like a servant in the manor, but since he could control a flying sword, he was clearly not a servant. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He looked at the nursery beds around him. It seemed like it was all thanks to this old man that everything looked so neat and tidy. He actually couldn't see through his cultivation? Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself. He was now in the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. Among the rogue cultivators he had met recently, there were few who had a higher cultivation than him. He didn't expect that an inconspicuous disabled rogue cultivator would have a higher cultivation than him. What surprised him the most was that this old man's cultivation was at least in the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage. But he was doing this rough work here. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and frowned. He walked up to the old man and cupped his hands, saying, "May I ask if you are the owner of this place?" Haha. As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, he heard a lot of laughter around him. He looked around and saw groups of rogue cultivators staring at him and laughing. It was obvious that they were laughing at him. Yu Qianqiu looked at himself and touched his face. He didn't find anything wrong, so he didn't know why they were laughing at him. So he cupped his hands and said, "I'm Niu Yud. I'm new here. Why are you laughing at me? But what did I say or do wrong?" When he said this, he looked at the old man behind him with an inquiring look. However, the old man seemed to be oblivious to his own business and only cared about cutting his own branches. "You don't need to say anything. We also know that you are new here," someone said coldly. Then a group of people laughed again. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw several people sitting unsteadily on the railings of a corridor, separated by a red-crowned branch eaves. One of them was leaning against a pillar and playing with a bamboo flute in his hand. He glanced at him disdainfully, giving off a cool feeling. Yo, he looks so young. But his cultivation has already reached the early stage of the nascent soul realm. No wonder he learned to look at people sideways. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He didn't know what he had done to provoke him, so he pointed at him and asked, "Stupid bird, did you say that just now?" Haha. The laughter around him sounded again, but the faces of those people opposite him didn't look so good. They all stood up and shouted at the same time. "Who are you talking about?" "I say him. There are a few holes in the bamboo, but he's still trying to act cool. and make a fool of himself. Yu Qianqiu's tone, as well as his hand gesture, was just short of poking his forehead with his finger. If Nongzhu heard this, she would definitely fight with him. What a joke! What kind of people did Yu Qianqiu usually meet, and what kind of things he did? If he randomly picked someone he knew, these guys would look up to him. Just by showing off something he had done, he was able to stun these fellows. Even if it was his own reputation, it was earned through fighting and not through bragging. As long as he flashed his name, he would be able to scare these guys to the point where they would be looking for their teeth on the ground. Nowadays, he had a famous title in the cultivation world. The butcher of the cultivation world. The two sides were not at the same level at all. He didn't want to argue with these low-level people at all, so he tried to be polite when talking to them. Who knew that the world was full of bastards who looked down on others, and bullied the weak, and feared the strong. He worked hard and risked his life to climb to this point. It was good enough that he didn't bully others casually. How could he be humiliated by others casually? The cultivator with the bamboo flute began to look at Yu Qianqiu directly. When he found that he couldn't see through his cultivation, his face changed slightly. He stretched out his hands to block the people around him and said softly, "His cultivation is higher than mine." After that, he cupped his hands and smiled apologetically to Yu Qianqiu. The other people's faces also changed. They didn't dare to say anything, and sat down quietly. In the cultivation world, those who couldn't stand being bullied were usually short-lived, especially these rogue cultivators who didn't have any background. There was always a higher mountain. If you wanted to be tyrannical, you had to bully the weak. If you wanted to compromise, you had to pretend to be a grandson. This was the general rule of the cultivation world. Even those soul formation experts had to smile carefully when they saw Bai Changchun. There were some things and some people that no one could afford to offend. Aha! The people around them burst into laughter again. Yu Qianqiu stared at them and snorted coldly. If it wasn't for the old guy who he didn't know anything about, and didn't want to expose himself too much, with his temper, he wouldn't be able to avoid beating these guys, let alone killing them. What he hated the most was those stupid birds who acted cool without any ability. These kind of people were disgusting and should be killed. At this time, Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun came back almost at the same time. The two of them were slightly stunned when they saw their boss standing beside the old man. Yu Qianqiu raised his thumb and poked the back of his shoulder. "Who is this old guy? He ignored me when I asked him." Fu Chun walked over and dragged him with a bitter smile. "Boss, this senior is deaf and mute. He can't hear you when you ask him. How can he answer you?" Qin Jiaxing laughed slyly at the side. He had a shifty-eyed face to begin with, and this laugh made him look even more filthy. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Now he understood why everyone laughed at him. He was talking to a deaf and mute stupidly. It would be strange if others didn't laugh. "Did you find an empty room?" Qin Jiaxing scratched his head at Fu Chun and said, "The houses on the east side have all been occupied. With Yu Qianqiu's disturbance, it seems like everyone has rushed over to the Jinshan Kingdom to join in the fun. The weather is not good. Who knows when it will rain? It's understandable that there are so many people." Fu Chun looked at the sky and frowned. "There are a few rooms on the west side. Unfortunately, they are occupied by a few women. I discussed with them and wanted them to squeeze in, but they refused." "Women?" Qin Jiaxing asked with interest. "Do they look like water?" "You're interested," Fu Chun said with disdain. "The 6 disciples of the Misty Rain House of Passion Lake. You can go and try." "Misty Rain House of Passion Lake?" Qin Jiaxing shrunk his head and smiled. "Forget it. I can't afford to offend them." "Misty Rain House of Passion Lake of Lu Nangua?" Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked. Seeing the two of them nodding their heads, he paused and asked, "How many rooms did they occupy?" Fu Chun shook her head. "They are arrogant. 6 of them occupied 6 rooms." Qin Jiaxing muttered. "The disciples of big clans are awesome." He could hear the helplessness in his voice. Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sky. It might really rain. Although cultivators were not afraid of rain, it was not a good feeling to not have a place to rest on a rainy night. Of course it would be comfortable to stay in an inn in Gold Casting City. But didn't he want to get some information? Thus he raised his hand. "Bring me there." I will go and talk to them. Qin Jiaxing winked. Boss can handle 2 people at once. It will definitely be settled. He then led the way with Fu Chun. Yu Qianqiu took a few steps and stopped. He turned around and walked to the side of the elder. Although he knew the elder couldn't hear him, he still cupped his fists and bowed. I was ignorant just now. If I offended you, please forgive me. The elder's back was facing him. He continued with his work, and probably didn't hear him. Yu Qianqiu didn't mind. He walked in front of the elder, and waved his hand. The elder stopped and stared at him coldly. The people around them stared at them. They didn't know what this rascal was trying to do. Yu Qianqiu smiled at the elder to show that he didn't have any bad intentions. He took out a jar of good wine from his storage bag, and stuffed it into the elder's arms. He turned around and left. Chapter 532. He had no ulterior motives. He simply felt that this old man's cultivation was not low, but he was willing to give up ostentatious things to do this rough work. He was worthy of respect. His view of life was that he liked to distinguish good and bad from bad, and to see a person's character from little by little. It was that simple. He definitely did not have any ulterior motives towards this old man. Besides, he did not see how this old man could be taken advantage of. However, his actions caused a flash of surprise to flash across the old man's eyes. Then, he threw the wine into his storage bag, and continued with his work. The courtyards of large families were indeed deep. After the 3 of them walked around for a while, they could see groups of 2 or 3 chatting on almost every road. The topics were all Yu Qianqiu and matters related to Miss Forest. Yu Qianqiu's face tightened. There was no need to talk about how depressed he was. He had set a trap for himself, and in the end, he had fallen into it. Yes, he had deliberately spread the news about the Myriad Swords Demon Lord in Mist Forest. His goal was to gather a bunch of people into Mist Forest, and then ruthlessly slaughter a bunch of them, so that they would not bully others with their numbers. To put it bluntly, he was still angry at being hunted down by thousands of people. Weren't you guys crazy for 2 treasured swords? Then now that I have a treasure of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, I'm sure it will make you guys even crazier? However, he had miscalculated. This bunch of people had all changed their temperaments. They were very patient, and did not make a move. Instead of going to Mist Forest to study how to enter, they had all set their sights on him. Thus, he had tried to seduce them several times in Mist Forest, but they did not fall for it. Instead, they patiently waited for him to come out, prepared to capture him alive, and not prepared to fight him to the death. This caused him to lose his temper, and he could only come out to find a chance to cause trouble. Who knew that after he did not appear, the World Commerce Association became even more despicable. Relying on their wealth, they actually put a bounty of 100 million, causing him to change his appearance again. If he had known this would happen, he would have blackmailed Yin Baikong for a few hundred million. How regretful. What depressed him the most was that in order to make his story about the Myriad Swords Demon Lord more believable, he had used the terrain of the basin to make his story more believable. Who would have thought that those guys would be able to guess that it was the Immortal Ascension stage? Everyone knew of the Immortal Ascension stage, but he had never heard of it. Failure. She followed Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun as they turned left and right in the manor. Finally, they arrived at a courtyard with a single door that was half covered by grapevines. The green grape seeds were thick and plump, and had yet to ripen. The 3 of them walked in. There were indeed 6 rooms inside, 2 facing each other, forming a long cylindrical garden. Looking at the layout, when this family was still prosperous, this should have been a corner where the servants lived. However, in this situation, because it was a private courtyard, there were no people coming and going to disturb him. It was quiet. Under the grape trellis, there was a round stone table. 4 women in pink were sitting, and 2 were standing. Before they came in, they could still hear the chatter inside, but now they were all staring at the 3 people who came in. Yu Qianqiu casually glanced at them. Their looks were not bad, but they were still lacking compared to his woman. As she was sizing them up, a woman who was sitting suddenly stood up and walked over with a sneer on her face. She stared at Fu Chun and coldly said, "What? You still haven't given up?" That woman's eyes were big and bright. She had a round face and a sharp chin. With one look, one could tell that she was not someone to be trifled with. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing subconsciously shrank back. To them, a disciple of the Misty Rain House of the Passion Lake could kill itinerant cultivators like them as easily as crushing 2 ants. No matter how powerful Boss Neo was, he could not face a colossus like the Misty Rain House. The Misty Rain House was indeed a colossus in the cultivation world, but the two of them had underestimated their boss. Not to mention the Misty Rain House, Yu Qianqiu had even made a move on the World Commerce Association, which was known as the most powerful force in the cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu's expression immediately darkened. He looked at the two people beside him. These two underlings had really made him proud. They were really not presentable, especially in front of a woman. With me here, they actually dared to cower. He could not help but let out a cold humph. He had been eating and drinking well during this period of time. Fu Chun braced herself and stepped forward, saying, "This is our boss. He has personally come to discuss with you." "Boss?" That woman laughed unscrupulously and said, "Mere itinerant cultivators dare to call themselves boss in front of the Misty Rain House? You really don't know what's good for you. Come, let me see how much your boss is worth." As she spoke, she walked closer and sized up Yu Qianqiu. Her slender fingers rolled up her sleeves, as if she was really going to teach him a lesson. "Discuss my ass." Yu Qianqiu was enraged. He pulled Fu Chun to the back and stared at the approaching woman with a cold smile. "If you wave that big chest of yours in front of me again, I don't care if you are from the Misty Rain House or not. Be careful that I don't crush it." Once he said that, everyone was shocked. They all suspected that they had heard wrongly. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other. The 5 women at the stone table were even more dumbfounded. The woman standing in front of Yu Qianqiu opened her mouth wide, her face full of disbelief. When she saw Yu Qianqiu raise his hand, she cried out in fright and took a few steps back. Then she said angrily, "How dare you? You dare to humiliate the Misty Rain House?" "Misty Rain House? What a great reputation." Yu Qianqiu chuckled coldly and said, "You were the one who bullied me first. Now you want to put *T on me. You can always find a reason to accuse me. But it's fine. I'll play with you anytime. You're courting death." That woman raised her hand, and 3 silver lights appeared in her hand. Upon closer inspection, they were actually 3 thin needles that were about a foot long. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. There was actually someone who used such an artifact. "Junior sister, stop." The 5 women at the stone table cried out in surprise. The woman who attacked did not notice, but they realized that they could not see through her cultivation. In addition, from her words, she did not seem to care about the Misty Rain House. Clearly, she was not an ordinary person. This was not their first time in the cultivation world. When they understood that the name of the Misty Rain House could only frighten the timid, when someone really dared to make a move, they still had to avoid the strong and go for the weak. This was something that must be understood in the cultivation world. Otherwise, they would be playing with their lives. However, they seemed to have shouted a little too late. Moreover, in her rage, she did not care about what was right or wrong. A silver light scattered out from her hand, forming a silver rainbow under the green grapevines. It shot straight at Yu Qianqiu's chest. "Insignificant tricks. You dare to use them to embarrass yourself." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and hit the silver light with his palm. The silver needle went straight into his palm, and his hand immediately clenched into a fist. "Boss!" Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing cried out in surprise. They rushed over and released their flying swords at the same time. The 2 of them sandwiched Yu Qianqiu in the middle and looked at his fist worriedly. Imagine how it would feel to have a silver needle that was more than a foot long in your hand. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the 2 of them, and his expression became slightly better. Because of the 2 of them retreating, he had a stomach full of anger. But now, it seemed that he did not make a mistake in choosing these 2 as his underlings. At the crucial moment, they still had some conscience and knew to care for him. It was not in vain that he fed them well. Otherwise, he would have made them spit it out with interest. The 5 women at the stone table heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this person was just a pretentious flower. However, the expression of the woman who released the flying needle changed. Others might not know, But she knew that the moment the flying needle went into the other party's palm, it had completely severed its connection with her. She sized up Yu Qianqiu again, and her expression changed again. She could not see through his cultivation. Knowing that she had encountered a cultivator, she did not dare to act rashly. Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at the women and snorted. A few core formation stage girls dare to not know the immensity of heaven and earth. One day, I will go to the pavilion of misty rain at the Passion Lake to take a look and see how Enchanting teaches his disciples. A man who only takes in female disciples, it would be strange if he could teach them well. The Enchanting he was talking about was the leader of Lu Nangua, an expert of the intermediate stage of the demigod realm. He called himself the Pavilion Master of the Pavilion of Misty Rain at the Passion Lake. It was a very elegant title. When these words were spoken, the expressions of the women became somewhat uneasy, especially what Yu Qianqiu did next. It made the women even more frightened. They saw Yu Qianqiu raise one of his clenched fists, and as he opened his fingers, fine silver powder gently floated down and slowly fell like a drizzle. It faintly formed a layer on the ground. The women were dumbstruck. This was a little too frightening. They did not know how high this person's level of cultivation was. Not only did he dare to open his hand to grab an instrument, but he also crushed the instrument into powder in the blink of an eye. Thinking about what he said just now, it seemed like the Pavilion of Misty Rain at the Passion Lake was just a place he could go whenever he wanted, and he even dared to call Enchanting by his name. This was not something a normal loose cultivator would dare to say. In addition to this frightening method, the identity of this person in front of them became even more mysterious. Even Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other. Their heads were full of doubts. Only now did they realize that this boss was not simple. Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly glanced at them, but he was secretly very proud. Ever since he understood the gold spell, he did not believe that the gold spell could only play tricks like turning stone into gold. That would be too boring. Thinking about how his master asked Nongzhu to pass on a message to teach him the water spell, he secretly pondered for a long time. The power of the fire spell was being released, and the power of the water spell was being absorbed. Then the gold spell should also have a way to release its power. Hiding in the basin of the mist forest, he pondered over and over again. After endless attempts, he finally found the way. Only then did he realize that the gold spell could not only absorb gold, it could also absorb the elements of any metal. After experimenting for a while, he finally comprehended an incredible technique. It seemed that as long as it was a metal, it could be instantly decomposed under the power of the gold spell. A piece of gold could be turned into gold powder, and in a flash, it could be condensed back into a piece of gold. Whether it was dark steel or nether iron, in short, he tried all kinds of metals that he had. He did not know if he did not try, but when he tried he was shocked. This gold spell was too domineering. He tried refining instruments with various metal materials from Chun Feng, but none of them could withstand the power of the gold spell. They were instantly turned into dust. Chapter 533. He didn't know if there were any metals that couldn't be decomposed by the gold art. In any case, none of the metals he had could withstand the power of the gold art. Today was the first time he had tried out his skills. As expected, he shocked his brothers and sisters. It felt great to act tough. Do you really want to fight me? Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. The woman who attacked him took a few steps back in panic. She had never seen such a technique before. She believed that even an expert in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage wouldn't be able to crush her magic tool with one palm. In other words, the person in front of her was someone who had surpassed the final phase of the tribulation passing stage. The girls also thought of this. A frightening guess appeared in their minds. This person was an expert in the soul-forming stage. No wonder he dared to call Enchanting by his name. At least, based on his cultivation level, he couldn't be an ordinary loose cultivator. The woman looked at her sisters for help. The girls exchanged glances and quickly walked over. They lined up in a row and bowed in unison. One of them was an intelligent woman. She was probably the leader of the group. She cupped her hands and said, "May I know which senior has arrived? We were reckless. Please forgive us." Not fighting anymore? Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly. We wouldn't dare. The intelligent woman said respectfully. Senior's power is not something we can resist. We don't dare to be rash. Please tell us your name. When we return, we will apologize to our masters. Yu Qianqiu didn't answer her. Instead he asked, what generation are you disciples in the Misty Rain House? He remembered something recorded in the Jade Archive. Lunanggua's Yunantian was a man. He was obviously a man, but he only accepted female disciples. It was said that he had a lot of beautiful women under him. All the disciples he taught were of the love generation. The disciples of the disciples were arranged according to the 5 words, Passion Lake Misty Rain House. When the girls heard his question, they knew that he wouldn't argue with them anymore. They sighed in relief. However, they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu didn't want to make a big deal out of this. It was fine if he acted tough. Otherwise they would suffer. Smoky rainbow, smoky fay, smoky clear, smoky rue, hazy dawn. The girls took the initiative to report their names. The leading girl cupped her fists and said, Yen Lan, we are all disciples with the surname Yen. So much smoke it's really suffocating. Yu Qianqiu muttered. His gaze swept across the few of them and said, There's no need to be so courteous. I'll have to trouble everyone to vacate this room. Although his words were tactful, there was an unquestionable tone to them. The girls didn't dare to have any objections, and immediately went to make arrangements. The woman who made the move was called Haze. Seeing Yu Qianqiu's eyes sweeping over her big chest, she was scared and trembling. Remembering that this senior had just said that he would crush it, she quickly lowered her head and walked away. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing stood at the side, and felt a little unnatural. They no longer dared to talk and laugh like before. They didn't expect that they would follow an unknown master. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them and frowned. You two, stiffen your backs in the future. Don't embarrass me. The two of them said yes, and subconsciously straightened their backs. It was hard to tell whether they were nervous or excited. They were nervous and excited because this boss was really awesome. Soon, not only were the rooms vacated, but there were 3 of them. The girls gave the best one to Yu Qianqiu. When Yu Qianqiu arrived at the room, he drove Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing out, and asked them to inquire about the news. He was lying on the bed thinking about the problem. He needed to sort out what had happened during this time. If he didn't have a clue and rushed around, sooner or later, he would fall into someone else's trap. There was a woman's body fragrance on the bed. Yu Qianqiu's eyelids gradually drooped, and he slowly fell asleep. It was not that he was physically weak, but he didn't need to constantly refine his qi and practice like others. Ever since he formed his gold core, he hadn't meditated to refine his qi. The things in his dantian would automatically refine them. Whenever he felt mentally exhausted, he always liked to sleep to relieve it. Otherwise, his brain wouldn't be able to stop. Other people couldn't see that he was mentally exhausted, so they all thought he was a lunatic. While he was half asleep, he was awakened by the whispers outside. The light in the room was hazy, and the paper window was slightly white. It seemed that the sky was about to turn dark. He got off the bed and opened the door to take a look. Sure enough, it was already dark. The 6 women and 2 men, who were huddled together at the door, all turned to look at him. Senior Niu. The girls saluted together. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing called out, Boss. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the 2 guys. It seemed that they had already told his name to the girls. But it didn't matter. In any case, it wasn't his real name. From the looks of it, the 2 fellows had already gotten close to the 6 women, and were able to get along well with them. Jijiza, what's the matter? Yu Qianqiu asked. Boss, it's like this. Qin Jiaxing scratched his head and said, There will be a lot of cultivators gathering at Ghost Manor's mountain-leaning pavilion at night. It's a good opportunity to get some information. We want to ask Boss if he wants to go. While they were talking, several groups of people were already flying toward the back of the mountain on their swords. Oh, Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sky. The sky, which was originally covered with dark clouds, had cleared up. It probably wouldn't rain anymore. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, Go, let's join in the fun. Then he pointed at the girls and said, Don't call me senior anymore. The girls looked at each other. They all knew that he didn't want to expose his identity. The leader Yin Lan nodded and said, Understood. Don't call me senior, call me mister. The girls saluted at the same time and said, Greetings, mister. The 6 sweet voices made people's bones go numb. Yu Qianqiu quivered. He waved his hand and said, Fine, fine, fine. Let's go. He threw a flying sword and stepped on it. His cooperative action instantly reduced the pressure on the girls. They couldn't help but cover their mouths and chuckle. They punched and hit Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing with their fists and pushed them away. The 2 of them didn't care about being hit at all. They laughed so hard that they almost couldn't tell north from south. They happily stepped on their swords and chased after Boss. Think about it. If they hadn't met Boss, the Misty Rain Pavilion's female disciples wouldn't have flirted with them. Their days were getting better and better. It was really a happy life as a lone cultivator. The mountain-leaning pavilion was built on a hillside behind Ghost Manor. At the bottom of the hillside was a flat grassland. Under the night sky, there was a big bonfire in the middle of the grassland. There were also many small bonfires around it. The lone cultivators came from all over the world. There were all kinds of countries. Actually, the boundaries between countries didn't mean anything to them. That was because they couldn't get any protection from the countries they were born in. They were just lone cultivators who didn't join any sections. How many cultivators who came from sects would pay attention to them? In the cultivation world, they were like ants. They wandered around alone and didn't care about the boundaries between countries. While they struggled to find longevity, they could only live and get drunk today. The bonfire roasted the wild game, making the faces of the people near it red. The fragrance of the wine wafted in the wind. The wind of the wilderness blew gently. There was also an unorthodox song full of vicissitudes. Some people sang along. It was a different kind of style that lingered under the mountain-leaning pavilion. When Yu Qianqiu and the others arrived, they immediately attracted many people's attention. Most importantly, the 6 pink-clothed girls' uniforms were too eye-catching. Anyone with a bit of knowledge would know that they were from the Misty Rain Pavilion of Lu Nan's National Love Lake. Yu Qianqiu looked around. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were on his left and right, and the 6 girls were behind the 3 of them. Many people recognized Yu Qianqiu as the ruffian from earlier in the day, but they didn't understand what he meant. Why would the Misty Rain Pavilion's people surround and protect 3 lone cultivators? Yu Qianqiu's identity immediately made people try to figure it out. In the eyes of the crowd, he also seemed tall and mighty. Many people's eyes were filled with envy. Being able to associate with people from large sects was a matter of great pride for lone cultivators. Usually, when there was a fight between lone cultivators, if the weaker party said that they knew someone from a large sect, the stronger party usually wouldn't dare to be ruthless. Fang Ming, who are these 3 fellows? Look at their shifty-eyed faces. How did they get involved with the Misty Rain Pavilion? The voice wasn't loud, but it was full of jealousy. The person who said this was one of the people who had talked back to Yu Qianqiu during the day. The 5 of them surrounded a bonfire. The person called Fang Ming was the young man who often played with his flute. The bonfire found a trace of jealousy in his bright eyes. TSK. 6 female disciples from the Misty Rain Pavilion. If each of us could get one of them, we would have at least 100 years to work hard. Another person shook his head and sighed. This made the jealousy in Fang Ming's eyes intensify. This was how the cultivation world was. If a lone cultivator could become Dao companions with someone from a large sect, they would be considered to have pledged allegiance to that sect. Basically, their status as a lone cultivator would end. Usually, female lone cultivators would marry into large sections. However, it was relatively difficult for male lone cultivators to marry female disciples from large sections. Unless it was an extremely talented person. First, it had to be someone that the large sects would take an interest in and want to recruit. Second, it had to be a female disciple of a large sect who took an interest in you and begged you to marry them. Otherwise, the chances would be very slim. The relationship between men and women in the cultivation world was very realistic. For many people, if dual cultivation didn't help, they would rather cultivate alone. That way it would be less burdensome. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a trace of surprise in his eyes. He didn't expect to see such a scene in the cultivation world. Interesting. He raised his hand and said, "Get some firewood." Let's light a bonfire here and join in the fun. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing immediately flew into the mountain to look for firewood. The women were more meticulous and immediately cleaned the grass on the spot. What a joke! Although they were from the Misty Rain Pavilion, they had basically never seen Yu Nanshan's face. Even if they saw him, they would only look at him from afar. Now that they had a spirit-severing cultivator, with the same cultivation as their ancestor, they had to serve him well. Yu Qianqiu didn't care about the gazes around him. Although he looked like a lone cultivator, he was like a crane in a flock of chickens. He crossed his arms and looked at the hillside. There were 4 incandescent cages, hanging on the 4-corner pavilions on the hillside. He could clearly see the situation in the pavilion. A one-armed old man was sitting there alone, holding a jar of wine and drinking alone. Chapter 534. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth raised into a smile. He could recognize that the jar of wine was given to him by him. It was indeed a good wine. It was the Wind wine taken from Yuji of the Demon Ghost region. It was not a good wine that anyone could drink. The old man's eyes seemed to always look at him intentionally or unintentionally. Their eyes met several times. Yu Qianqiu smiled back, but the old man's eyes were still cold. As a result, Yu Qianqiu was very sullen, so he simply turned around. In front of him, nearly 1,000 people had gathered here. They were drinking and eating to their heart's content, giving off a forthright atmosphere of the Jianghu. This was a feeling that Yu Qianqiu liked very much, and it made him feel much better. Heaven, earth, I am here drifting, where can I go? Under the starry night sky, under the bonfire, some people bared their teeth and brandished their claws around the bonfire, dancing a strange dance like a big crab. Some people even took out their flying swords and hit them with a clanking sound, singing a wild tune with their mouths. It was a pure man's tune. Pride and frustration were roared out from their throats. Even if they were drunk, they would still wake up. Although the world was big, tomorrow they would still be unknown little rogue cultivators. You are from the Misty Rain Tower, right? Let us help you. Several people sitting around on the side had been staring here, seeing the 6 women doing rough work. Someone finally couldn't help but start to strike up a conversation. As soon as they opened their mouth, 7 or 8 wolf-like men couldn't wait to get up and rush over here. Get out of here! Hazy Haze roared, scaring several people and making them sit back down. This caused the surrounding people to roar with laughter. Although the laughter was forthright, there was some bitterness hidden in it. It was not known whether they were laughing at those people who were defeated, or laughing at themselves for wanting to eat swan meat. Several women were busy around Yu Qianqiu's feet. Yu Qianqiu stood there with his arms crossed, tilting his head to look at the movement just now. There was a faint smile on his face, and he was not angry because of those people's collision just now. In his previous life, he had started out as a commoner, so he naturally had a better understanding of the mentality of the small fry. These people clearly wanted to curry favor with the Misty Rain Pavilion's female disciple, hoping to gain a favorable impression of them and escape their lonely status as independent cultivators. If he was like them now, would he also want to rely on this method to get a higher position? Yu Qianqiu looked into the distance. The answer in his heart was no. He admitted that he was not a good person. Perhaps the methods he used were more bloody, violent, or evil, but he would never use such a method. Because he was ambitious, daring to think, daring to work hard, daring to risk his life, daring to challenge an unfair fate, and unswerving determination to move forward, he was destined to have a bigger stage. If he couldn't succeed, he would just have to die. That was how a man should be. Crawling under a woman's skirt, wagging his tail to beg for pity, or to win sympathy, were just small tricks. Once he did that, the road he had to walk would be even more bumpy, and he would have to endure even more humiliation. At this moment, Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing each carried a large bundle of firewood back, and they even carried a pheasant and a wild hare in their hands. They showed off to the women, and their faces were full of smiles. This caused the women to cheer, and they grabbed the firewood and prepared to barbecue it. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he looked at the 2 of them, and he backed off, making space in the middle for them to pile the firewood. After the bonfire was lit, the few of them sat around it. The three men here could be said to be a thorn in everyone's side, and they were too enviable. There was a man between every two women, and there were two other women who were busy barbecuing. Yu Qianqiu took out a few jars of good wine, and threw them to the few of them. He picked up the wine jars, removed the clay seals, and drank to his heart's content. After that, he put down the wine jars, and attentively listened to the conversations around him. Damn it! His limelight had been stolen by these girls. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, and realized that the people around him were all talking about the 6 women around him, and it seemed like all of them wanted to get close to him. Fortunately, there was still a group of people talking about business. Forget it. Don't look. No matter how delicious the meat is, we can't bite it. Let's talk about that Yu Qianqiu. What's the use of talking about him? That butcher is hiding somewhere, and it's really easy to find him. Have you heard? World Commerce's Guanzhongkai has already brought a large amount of reward money, and is holding down the fort in Gold Casting City. If anyone can get news of Yu Qianqiu, they can directly report it. It's not just Guanzhongkai. I heard that there are also 8 World Commerce's late-stage tribulation passing experts following him. Hehe, that's nothing. It's said that Yin Baikong's eldest disciple, Sikong Ju, is leading a large group of World Commerce's experts to await orders. As long as they find Yu Qianqiu, they will personally come out. If that's the case, then World Commerce is determined to get him. Of course, World Commerce's wealth is unparalleled, and World Commerce's influence is the greatest in the world. Yin Baikong's cultivation is one of the top 10 experts in the cultivation world. Hey, look, that woman's breasts are really big. Damn, this can also change the topic. Yu Qianqiu was listening attentively, and almost choked to death by these words that were cut off halfway. Following the gaze of those people, he saw that they were talking about hazy haze, which really made him speechless. Woo, 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 woo. Suddenly, an ethereal and graceful sound of a flute rang out in the surroundings, leisurely floating in the night sky. The surrounding noise suddenly quieted down, and everyone looked for the source of the sound. In the end, everyone's gazes all fell on the hillside pavilion at the top of the hill. On the hillside illuminated by the bonfire, under the incandescent light of the pavilion, a graceful figure was facing downwards. Blue muslin clothes, blue muslin hat, and one couldn't see her true appearance. Her slender jade-like fingers rose and fell, holding a flute vertically and playing it under the cover of the blue muslin. There was a faint and inexplicable sorrow in the song, and no one knew what the player was thinking. Yu Qianqiu could be considered a person who had a rough understanding of music now. Listening attentively, he felt that this woman's tune was filled with endless loneliness and endless blankness. In reality, this song was a bit out of tune, and was completely played at will. After listening for a while, everyone felt very bored, and began to discuss again. However, they were all guessing what the woman's appearance under the blue muslin was like. Because just looking at that graceful figure, it was indeed a first-class figure. The blue muslin clothes wrapped around a plump and well-proportioned body. She was neither tall nor short, and her hands were also pure white and crystal clear. However, no one knew what her face looked like. The strangest thing was that the one-armed old man was actually standing behind her in a somewhat respectful manner, slightly bowing his head in silence. Everyone who had some understanding of Ghost Village knew that this old man's cultivation wasn't low. Although he was disabled, with his existence, no one dared to act recklessly in Ghost Village. Actually, all the wandering cultivators who were able to settle down here had to thank this old man. If it wasn't for his existence, Ghost Village would have long been abandoned. It was he who had been quietly taking care of this place, and gave everyone a place to settle down. Most importantly, if anyone was chased by enemies, they would be safe if they hid here. It seemed like no one dared to seek revenge in Ghost Village. Such a mysterious old man was now obediently standing behind a woman. This was something that none of the wandering cultivators had ever seen before. Everyone didn't even need to think to know that this woman's origin was definitely not ordinary. Do any of you know where this one-armed old man came from? Yu Qianqiu asked the people around him. In any case, he knew nothing about this old man. Qin Jiaxing withdrew his gaze from the leaning mountain pavilion and shook his head. I don't know. In any case, I heard from some wandering cultivators that he has always been here. I don't know when he started. Yu Qianqiu looked at Fu Chun, but he also shook his head to show that he didn't know. On the other hand, Yin Lan frowned and said, "This senior's identity is very mysterious. He never talks to anyone and doesn't easily hurt anyone. Therefore, there are rumors that he is deaf and mute. As for whether it's true or not, I don't know. Anyway, that's what everyone says." But what? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. Yin Lan hesitated for a while and said, "The Misty Rain Tower has made it clear that none of our disciples are allowed to cause trouble in Ghost Village. They are also not allowed to be rude to this old man. Otherwise, they will be severely punished." Oh. Yu Qianqiu was surprised and re-examined the one-armed old man. Yin Lan then asked softly, "Mister, with your experience, you still don't know where he came from?" F***CK. I don't have any experience at all. Yu Qianqiu stammered. N. Woo woo woo. Suddenly, the sound of a flute was heard and joined the flute. It sounded like a flute and a flute were playing together. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound. A person stood up next to the bonfire and blew the flute at the green-veiled woman in the mountain-leaning pavilion. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and was startled. It was the B***TCH, who almost made him attack her earlier in the day. He didn't expect her to be acting cool here again. However, listening to the sound, he realized that the flute in this person's hand wasn't just for fun. He actually knew a bit about music and filled in the gaps in the woman's song. For a moment, it complemented each other and made the song even more pleasant to listen to. However, the four people next to the person seemed a bit disappointed. "Good. It's so nice." They all clapped and cheered. Their flattery could drown an elephant. In the end, the flute in front of the mountain-leaning pavilion stopped playing. The woman had already put down the flute in her hand and seemed to be silently watching the scene below. The sound of the flute immediately became monotonous. Fang Ming also stopped playing and glared at the four people next to him. The four people immediately quieted down awkwardly. Fang Ming straightened his expression and walked out from the crowd. He walked towards the mountain-leaning pavilion and stopped at the foot of the hill. He cupped his hands together and said, "I am Fang Ming, a rogue cultivator. I suddenly heard the sounds of nature and couldn't help but play together with it. I hope you don't mind my rudeness." After he spoke politely, it seemed like the woman didn't want to talk to him anymore. The night wind blew against her green veil, but she didn't move an inch. Suddenly, a burst of laughter came from below. Someone whispered, "Look, another guy who wants to eat swan meat." Chapter 535. Roars of laughter rang out, and Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile. Fang Ming's four companions couldn't take it anymore. They all stood up and looked around. "Who is it? Come out and speak if you have the guts." "So what if I said it?" Three people also stood up not far away. One of them sneered, "Is this ghost manor your family's territory? You don't even allow us to speak?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the three people and found that they were all nascent soul cultivators. The one who spoke was even at the middle stage of nascent soul. These three people's cultivations were not low compared to rogue cultivators. When Fang Ming's four companions saw who it was, their expressions stiffened, and they stood there awkwardly. It was obvious that they were afraid of the three people. Fu Chun smiled and softly said, "Boss, these three people are somewhat famous among the rogue cultivators. I heard that they are all at the nascent soul stage. The one who spoke is called Tianyi." At the bottom of the hill, Fang Ming's expression changed. He slowly said to his companions, "Don't cause trouble in the ghost manor. All of you sit down." Although these words were said to his own people, everyone could tell that it was a warning to the three people. Yu Qianqiu picked up the wine jar and drank a mouthful. He looked at Fang Ming and smiled. Aside from acting cool, this guy's adaptability was pretty good. He was much better than some of the disciples from the big sections. He knew that his side was no match for the other party, so he used the ghost manner to scold his own people. In reality, he was reminding the other three that the ghost manor was not a place where they could mess around. After being scolded, the four people sat down in embarrassment. Fang Ming turned around and put on a warm smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Miss, please don't take it to heart. They are all uncultured people. Please forgive them for disturbing your mood. Although he didn't criticize them by name, he basically put the label of uncultured on everyone's head. However, there weren't many people who knew how to be cultured. Even if they didn't know how to be cultured, it wasn't his turn to say it. What right do you have to use everyone as a stepping stone to climb up the tree? Who do you think you are? These words were indeed a little too broad. Even Yu Qianqiu frowned. However, Fengyu was pure bullsh*t to him. He knew that he was constantly cursing and swearing. He had nothing to do with Fengyu at all. His mentality was different now. If it was a more powerful guy who said that, he might jump out and fight back. But now, a small grasshopper would not be able to overturn the heavens. However, the majority of the people were not happy. They spat and cursed. Even the veiled woman on the hill slowly turned around with the intention of leaving. The one-armed old man stepped aside to make way. The middle-stage nascent soul cultivator Tianyi pointed his finger and shouted, "Where did this madman come from? Holding a flute in your hand and blindly blowing it, you dare to pretend to be elegant and look down on the wandering cultivators of the world. If you have the ability, don't ever leave this ghost village." What he meant was, if you come out, I will take care of you. Feng Ming didn't take his threat to heart at all. Instead, the veiled woman was about to leave, and his eyes were filled with anxiety. He forced himself to calm down and laughed loudly. "Brother Tian, what you said is wrong. I once had the chance to meet Mr. Nongzhu of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest. I saw that Mr. Nongzhu was unparalleled in elegance, and was envious of him. That's why I followed his footsteps. Is he really that bad in your eyes?" Mr. Nongzhu of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest? The famous wandering cultivator, who was also a middle-stage soul formation cultivator. Mr. Nongzhu? The crowd instantly fell silent. The veiled woman who had just turned around also paused and slowly turned around. She seemed to be sizing up Feng Ming. The one-armed old man also stared at Feng Ming with bright eyes. His words shocked everyone. Feng Ming wore a faint smile on his face as he looked around. However, there was an uncontrollable pride in his eyes. His four brothers were even more proud and arrogant. The wandering cultivator's gazes toward Feng Ming instantly turned into that of admiration. The legendary Mr. Nongzhu. To them, he was a person who was far above them. He was someone they could never reach, not to mention reaching for it. Not many people had even seen it before. "Huh? How does this guy know that old bastard Nongzhu?" Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. He pinched his chin and looked at Feng Ming thoughtfully. Although his voice was very soft, Yan Lan still heard it. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with even more respect. This senior Nyo was indeed a master. It didn't sound like he was cursing. It seemed like he was very familiar with the legendary Mr. Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu didn't know that his unintentional muttering had attracted the attention of a pair of bright eyes. However, the pair of eyes was blocked by the green veil, so no one could see it. At the same time, the one-armed old man in the Leaning Mountain Pavilion also glanced over. The rumor that he was deaf and mute was able to hear such a small murmur. Tian Ye's imposing manner suddenly weakened. He didn't understand Feng Ming. He swallowed with difficulty and said, "Mr. Nongzhu is naturally elegant. I'm talking about you, not Mr. Nongzhu. But you can't just play a song and say that you know how to be elegant. You can laugh at us." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately sat down. Obviously, he had no intention of arguing with Feng Ming. There was a bright moon in the sky. From time to time, dark clouds would block the moonlight, and then they would be blown away by the breeze. The bonfires below were crackling, while the crowd was still in shock. Yu Qianqiu calmly picked up a piece of dry wood and threw it into the bonfire. Watching the rising red flames, he sighed in his heart. He used to hang out with the upper-class people in the cultivation world every day. He didn't know how many times he had quarreled with Nongzhu, and how many times he had argued with him. However, when he said the name Mr. Nongzhu, so many people didn't even dare to breathe heavily. It was really awesome. What he didn't know was that when he said the name, Yu Qianqiu, it could also shock these rogue cultivators. What a joke! Yu Qianqiu had killed more than 2,000 cultivators from different countries, all of whom were above the original infant stage. He had become famous in the cultivation world. He was the butcher of the cultivation world. What was different from Nongju was that one was famous all over the world, and everyone was in awe of him. On the other hand, he was famous all over the world, and everyone was afraid of him. Two pairs of eyes on the hillside had been secretly watching his actions. Compared with the shocked expressions of the crowd, his indifferent look seemed a little out of place. Brother Tian, you're right. I really can't be compared with Mr. Nongju. I was rude. Fang Ming chuckled and blamed himself. But looking at him, he didn't seem to blame himself at all. He was obviously proud. Looking around, he saw that the veiled woman was also listening, so he said with great interest, "Of course, although I'm not elegant, I've been deeply influenced by Mr. Nongju's elegant demeanor since I met him. So I made up my mind to learn from famous songs everywhere. My hard work paid off. And finally, I got a few peerless masterpieces. I wonder if you're interested in listening to them?" The elegant demeanor of Nongju? Why don't I know about it? What's the difference between that guy and a rascal? Elegant my ass. Yu Qianqiu's face twitched and he cursed in his heart. The crowd looked at each other and found that this place had become a place for him to perform. But they didn't know what relationship he had with Mr. Nongju, so they just stopped talking. Fang Ming's brothers naturally wouldn't let Fang Ming remain silent. They all cheered. "Of course we do. We're waiting to listen. I wonder what peerless masterpieces they are." Fang Ming laughed heartily and spoke to the crowd in a graceful manner. "Everyone is probably here for Yu Qianqiu, right? But you should know that although Yu Qianqiu is cruel and merciless, and is hunted by many countries, he's a peerless genius in music." Yu Qianqiu. Hearing this, everyone immediately whispered to each other. They really hadn't heard anything about Yu Qianqiu. "You asked me, I asked you, but no one had heard of him." Yu Qianqiu slightly opened his mouth in astonishment. He thought to himself, "Why are you talking about me?" Could it be that the peerless masterpieces he mentioned are? He vaguely guessed something. The awkward atmosphere was stirred up in an instant. Everyone was quite interested in the topic of Yu Qianqiu. Not many people here know about these songs. I spent a lot of effort to get them from the Chinese cultivation world. Fang Ming suddenly shook his head and sighed. The song White Fox is heartbreaking. I really want all the heartless men in the world to listen to it. The song Mandarin Duck and Butterfly Dream makes people feel like they're in a gentle dream. It's as if the clouds are parted and the blue sky is revealed. When the song ends, people wake up, but the tear stains are still there. The song Laughing at the World of Mortals laughs at all the funny things in the world. The vicissitudes of life are like passing wind and clouds. All I want is to be free and unfettered in this life. When the veiled woman at the side of the pavilion heard these words, her shoulders seemed to subconsciously move. And Yu Qianqiu was even more dumbfounded. Wow, why didn't I know that these three songs were so charming? This guy's eloquence was just too good. If he can't get a girl, then he's really heartless. I'll just bang my head against the wall and die. Everyone present was tempted by his words. They couldn't wait to ask him to hurry up and sing to see what kind of song could make him so melancholy. However, they wanted to continue listening to his next words, so they didn't disturb him. He sighed and said, Yu Qianqiu, what kind of person are you? Perhaps being unruly and ruthless is just your surface. Underneath that strong exterior of yours is a sentimental heart. The world is drunk, but you're the only sober one. You walk through the turbid world with cold eyes. Do you have a bosom friend? Sigh. I, Fang Ming, have been longing for you for a long time. It's a pity that I've only heard of you. You're a peerless genius. What a pity. Damn it. Is this stupid bird who acts cool my bosom friend? Why didn't I know I was so good? Yu Qianqiu bit his lips and his face twitched. He was almost moved to tears by Fang Ming's words. He cursed in his heart. What the hell? Chapter 536. If it wasn't for the fact that Qin Ming wanted to pick up girls and raise Yu Qianqiu's ego, Yu Qianqiu would have been moved by him. He grabbed the wine jar and took a big gulp. The girls clenched their fists, their faces full of longing. Big-breasted Haze muttered to herself. So Yu Qianqiu is this kind of person? Beside her, Misty Rainbow clenched her teeth and said, I wonder if we'll have the chance to meet him. The two of them seemed to have forgotten that they were here to gather information about Yu Qianqiu and then provide it to their sect to capture. Pooh! Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but spit the wine on the bonfire. The fire rose with the help of the wine. Seeing everyone looking at him in surprise, he awkwardly explained, "The fire is a bit small." They all looked at the bonfire and discovered that it wasn't small at all. However, they still added firewood to it. Qin Jiaxing added firewood as he muttered, "Look at your infatuated faces. That Yu Qianqiu only knows how to sing a song. He doesn't even know what he's singing about, yet you guys are so excited." Pooh! Yu Qianqiu spat out the wine he just drank. He expressionlessly wiped his mouth and pointed at the bonfire. "Make the fire bigger. Roast the meat a bit more, and make it crispy. It's almost done. Any more and it'll be burnt. Everyone share it." The others obediently followed his instructions. The pavilion was quiet. Only their area was different from the others. Spitting wine, playing with fire, and chattering non-stop. It was hard not to attract attention. The atmosphere that Fang Ming had painstakingly created was now a complete mess. Everyone's gazes were no longer focused on him. Instead, they all looked at the bonfire where Yu Qianqiu was. These people were very busy, happily distributing the roasted hare and roasted chicken. "Bastard Qin Jiaxing, where's the roasted chicken? Did you take it all for yourself? Fuck. Have you ever seen a chicken with 9 legs? I don't even have one myself." These two people's words were too vulgar. Yu Qianqiu immediately said in annoyance, "F***ck, be more civilized. If you don't get a leg, go gnaw on a chicken's butt." Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing immediately lost their temper. After a while, the 9 of them were chewing and gulping down mouthfuls of wine from time to time. The few of them grinned and said that it was delicious. However, the few of them suddenly realized that something was wrong with the atmosphere. They raised their heads almost at the same time and saw that everyone was looking at them. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He waved to the crowd and said, "Sorry, we'll eat first. You can continue to talk about Mr. Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu. All right, didn't you say you were going to sing a song? Come on, sing. I need a song to help me get drunk." The people around him burst into laughter, as if they thought Fang Ming was an actor. On the hillside, the red lips under the green veil raised a beautiful arc obviously. She was also smiling, but the others could not see it. If it were someone else, Fang Ming would have taught him a lesson. However, it was this guy who wanted to teach him a lesson during the day. Fang Ming could only swallow his anger. However, his face was not good. He said in a low voice, "It's okay if you don't take me seriously, but don't tarnish Mr. Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu." This guy was good at talking. It was obvious that he was using the two gods to suppress the other party. However, when it came to talking, Yu Qianqiu was not afraid of anyone at all. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu did not take the two gods seriously at all. It was useful to scare other rogue cultivators, but it was really a mistake to scare Yu Qianqiu. Is there something wrong with your brain? Don't use others to support you. When did I tarnish Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu? Yu Qianqiu thought that he had never seen someone so protective of his grandson. He drank a mouthful of wine, picked up a half-eaten drumstick, pointed at Fang Ming, and said, "Anyway, even if I tarnish Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu, it's none of your business. I did tarnish them. What's wrong with that? If the two bastards have a problem with it, tell them to come to me. Don't meddle in other people's business." His words were so arrogant that Fang Ming was speechless. He did not mention Yu Qianqiu. Fang Ming thought that he could scare Nongzhu by mentioning Nongzhu, but he dared to curse Nongzhu by mentioning her name. It seemed that he was not afraid that his words would fall into Nongzhu's ears. It was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to be afraid. He had scolded Nongzhu many times in front of her, not to mention behind her back. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other. Their boss was so awesome. No wonder his family name was Niu. Yan Lan and the other girls were full of admiration. This senior might be even more powerful than Mr. Nongzhu. Otherwise, who would dare to curse a master at the middle stage of Huashan realm like this? The place suddenly became quiet. Only the crackling of the bonfire could be heard. Everyone was searching for the name, Niu Yud, in their minds, but it seemed that they had never heard of him. On the other side, Tianai, who was scared by Fang Ming mentioning Nongzhu, felt even more ashamed now. Look at Fang Ming's courage, and then look at his own courage. Fang Ming's face darkened as he stared at the man who continued to eat and drink after cursing him. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he tossed the flute in his hand into his storage pouch and pulled out a zither. Then, he slowly sat down cross-legged in front of the veiled woman on the hill. Seeing that he put the guqin on his knees, everyone was immediately interested. They knew that he was going to play the song he mentioned just now. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and thought, this guy is really talented. He can play both the flute and the guqin. Although cultivators from different countries are hunting Yu Qianqiu, I still think that he is a peerless genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. I love music, but I have no chance to learn from him in person. The few songs that I have learned are only paraphrased by others. I didn't get the complete song, so I had to compose a song myself. I hope I won't disturb you. As soon as Fang Ming finished speaking, his 4 brothers cheered again. He continued, it is said that the song White Fox was written by Yu Qianqiu when he first joined the cultivation world of Huaxia. He met a white fox that had been cultivating for 1,000 years. Feeling the misery of the fox's life, Yu Qianqiu gave it to the fox girl. This song has been sung in the cultivation world of Huaxia for a long time. Please listen carefully. The sound of the zither rang out slowly. After a prelude, Fang Ming sang softly with the sound of the zither. I am a fox that has cultivated for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of cultivation, 1,000 years of solitude. In the dead of night, can anyone hear me crying? In the dim light, can anyone see me dancing? The night was quiet, and the song was lonely. It had to be said that Fang Ming was indeed skilled. As expected of a specialist, his singing was indeed touching. Even Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with confusion. He recalled the first time he met Bai Suzhen. As soon as the song was played, everyone was immersed in the heartbreaking song and music. From the lyrics, they could feel the misery of the white fox that had been cultivating for 1,000 years. The heart-wrenching scene of Can I Dance for You Again appeared in everyone's minds. Yu Qianqiu was awakened by the girls beside him. They could not help but let out soft sobs. Their eyes were red and glistened with tears. The rest of the people were also sighing. When the song was over, everyone was still immersed in the song. They shook their heads. It was a very emotional scene. Senior sister, that white fox is so pitiful. The hot-tempered Haze threw herself into Yan Lan's arms and cried bitterly. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were also in a daze. They had long forgotten to eat the roasted meat in their hands. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He could not help but sigh at the lack of spiritual food in this world. A song could move people to this extent. Fang Ming glanced at the girl on the hillside. It seemed that she did not have any reaction. Even if she did, it was blocked by the curtain of green silk. He looked around and said loudly, "What do you guys think of this song? Is Yu Qianqiu a genius?" "He is." The group of rogue cultivators roared in response. Some of them even exclaimed, "I didn't expect this. That butcher of the cultivation world actually knows how to play this song. Not only does he know how to play, even an uncouth man like me likes it. It's completely different from the sounds I used to hear. It makes me want to sleep. Tisk tsk. If I have the chance, I really want to meet this Yu Qianqiu and see what he looks like. Damn it. I am sitting right here. You guys have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai." Yu Qianqiu looked around. For the first time, he felt that being Yu Qianqiu was good. He wanted to stand up and tell everyone that he was Yu Qianqiu. The song is born from the heart. How bad can a person who can make such a song be? He must have been forced to do it. Fang Ming sighed. The result made everyone sigh again. Everyone knew that the reason why Yu Qianqiu killed the 2,000 cultivators was because the sects were hunting him for his treasures. Now that they thought about it again, they felt some sympathy for him. That Yu Qianqiu was forced to kill them because he had no other choice. The Dream of the Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies. It is said that this song was given to the vixen after Yu Qianqiu composed it. After hearing this song, the vixen's sorrow disappeared and she floated away. No one has seen her since. At this point, Fang Ming shook his head and sighed. Speaking of which, Although the white fox's fate was tragic, 2 of the 3 songs composed by Yu Qianqiu were actually given to her. It's really enviable. That white fox has no regrets in her life. Sigh. How enviable. I wonder who else in this world can make Yu Qianqiu compose a 4th song. He didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had actually made a song public when he was training in the Demon Ghost region. However, in order to hide the secret of the training in the Demon Ghost region, the sects strictly forbade their disciples from mentioning it, so the song didn't spread outside. Fong Ming, quickly sing Butterfly and Mandarin Duck Dream. This time, there was no need for Fong Ming's 4 brothers to liven up the atmosphere. Everyone couldn't wait any longer and shouted, "Yes, yes, quickly sing it." Yu Qianqiu looked around and saw the 6 women staring at Fong Ming with shining eyes like 6 female dogs in heat. This made Yu Qianqiu curse in his heart. Damn it, singing my song to show off. He suddenly remembered that he was also a pirate singer and was speechless. How dare I disobey everyone's orders? Fong Ming smiled and plucked the strings of the zither. After the beautiful prelude, he sang with a hint of melancholy. Yesterday was like the east flowing water, far away from me and can't stay. Today my heart is in chaos and worries. If I cut the water with a knife, it will flow even more. If I drink to drown my worries, it will make me worry even more. If I cut the water with a knife, it will flow even more. If I drink to drown my worries, it will make me worry even more. Under the night sky, the bonfire flickered. The group of people was relaxed and happy, and their hearts trembled with every word of the lyrics. The feeling of cutting the water with a knife, the feeling of powerlessness to drown one's worries, seemed to have been experienced by everyone. The song vividly interpreted the artistic conception. It couldn't be described with the word wonderful. No one had ever heard such a divine song. At the end of the song, many people looked at the wine pot in their hands and murmured, "If I drink to drown my worries, it will make me worry even more." What a beautiful song. The tears on Hazy Haze's face hadn't dried yet. She crossed her arms and said in annoyance, "Yu Qianqiu, where are you? It would be good if I could see you. You can't die." The other women were even more stunned. Even Yen Lan murmured as if she was in a dream, "If I cut the water with a knife, it will make me laugh even more." This Yu Qianqiu is really a wise man, who has seen through all kinds of life. In just a few words, he has described the joys and sorrows of a man and a woman. Every word is a gem. Dream of Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies. The title of the song is so beautiful. Yen Fei bent her legs and supported her chin with her hands. Her eyes flashed with dreamy brilliance and said, "I really want to see what Yu Qianqiu looks like now." "Yes," Yen Qing said in a daze. "I think he must be a handsome man." A group of love-struck fools. "I'm sitting right next to you." Yu Qianqiu rolled his dead fish eyes and looked back and forth at the 6 women unwillingly. Then he took a big bite of the drumstick in his hand. He looked like he wanted to tear the drumstick into pieces. After a few big bites, he put the bone in his mouth and chewed on it. Fong Ming smiled and looked around. The atmosphere was finally under his control again. Tonight was destined to be his night. He said in a clear voice, "What do you think after listening to these 2 songs? Now you know that what I said is true." "Not bad. This Yu Qianqiu is really something. A real talent, a real master. Even I, a rough guy, admire him from the bottom of my heart. Good song, he really is a genius." Everyone's praises came one after another. It was practically endless. Fong Ming nodded and said, "The song is good, the melody is good, and every word of the lyrics is like a jewel. I'm afraid only Yu Qianqiu could come up with such a song. Moreover, he matched it so well that it's unforgettable. What's more, it's said that this is Yu Qianqiu's impromptu work. He's really a genius." Yu Qianqiu drank his wine gloomily. He really did not know what to say. This was the first time he was praised by so many people, especially Fong Ming, who praised him as if he was the best in the world. Yu Qianqiu should be happy, but he could see that Fong Ming was clearly playing a trick. He was pouring water on Yu Qianqiu, and then propping up his broken boat. As the saying goes, a good song needs a good tune. Fong Ming said at the beginning that he got the song from the cultivation world in China. The tune was not complete, and he composed it himself. The more he made everyone think that this song was rare, the more they would think that his talent would be revealed when they thought about it. This kid is really something. He's even more shameless than me. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. Fang Ming composed the tune? It's obvious that he did it step by step. He's bullying everyone here because they haven't heard it before. I'm afraid he's going to play some tricks to make his wish come true. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the veiled woman on the hillside. She was the target that Fang Ming was trying his best to capture. I won't allow any bastard to take advantage of me to pick up girls. What he didn't know was that the eyes behind the veil were staring at him. Especially his cultivation that could not be seen through. It was very eye-catching. Basically, those who had interacted with him for a period of time knew that he was born this way. It was not because of a momentary lapse in judgment. Fang Ming, let's not talk about it. Sing that laughing at the world of mortals again. Yeah, sing it quickly. Let's hear it again. The group of people were already addicted to it. They could not wait to hear the third song. So they all urged, however, just as Yu Qianqiu expected, that guy began to play the trick of fishing for mermaids. Fang Ming slowly stood up and put away his guqin. He cupped his hands and apologized to the crowd. Everyone, I'm really sorry. Let's stop here for today. We'll talk again if there's a chance in the future. Because this third song is a masterpiece among masterpieces. If I don't adjust my emotions before singing it, it'll be a stain on this masterpiece. I really don't want to do such a thing. I hope that you won't force it. It's not like you can force it. As soon as these words came out, everyone sighed with regret. Someone even shouted, "How about tomorrow? At most, I'll wait another day before I leave. I want to listen to this masterpiece among masterpieces of masterpieces." Fang Ming replied in a cultured and refined manner. "Let's talk about it another day, another day." He did not give a definite answer from beginning to end. As he said this, he walked back to where he came from. His four brothers cheered and cheered loudly. "You're called Fang Ming, right?" Suddenly a cold snort sounded out. Fang Ming paused and looked toward the source of the sound. It was the guy who opposed him during the day. He reluctantly nodded and said, "That's right. What can I do for you?" "Advice my ass." Yu Qianqiu looked him up and down in disdain. He said, Fang Ming, Fang Ming. From the sound of this name, it should be a righteous person who does things openly and honorably. It's a disgrace to a liar like you with this name. Everyone was taken aback. They did not know where he was coming from. Fang Ming's expression changed. He said in a deep voice, "What did I lie to you about? Isn't this the first time we've met? Kid, you're asking for trouble by being so stubborn in front of me." Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "Let me ask you. You said that in the song you just sang, the zither song was composed by you?" Fang Ming was nervous, but he forced himself to be calm. "That's right. Hee. As luck would have it, I've heard Yu Qianqiu sing these two songs with my own ears. Although his unparalleled and divine skills are indeed thousands of times better than yours, and you are like trash compared to him. But why do I feel that the tunes you two play are almost the same? Was it you who composed them? Could it be that Yu Qianqiu stole your zither song?" Yu Qianqiu said with extreme malice. Chapter 537. Of course, at the same time, he didn't forget to praise himself. No one knew who he was anyway, so he should praise him. Don't hold back. He praised Yu Qianqiu to death. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Then, they began to whisper to each other, and looked at Fang Ming in confusion. After listening to him play two songs, everyone was still thinking about it. Although they knew that he was showing off, they were still amazed by him. Now that they suddenly heard this, they felt as if they had swallowed a fly. Fang Ming's four brothers stood up and waved their arms in anger. "How dare you? Where did this madman come from? Niu Yud, don't spout nonsense." Yu Qianqiu turned to the four of them and said indifferently, "Don't think that no one dares to touch you in the ghost village. I don't care if it's a ghost village or a god village. Try pointing fingers at me again. Do you believe that I won't pull out your tongues and knock out your teeth right now?" Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing winked at each other. They seemed to be a little excited. This boss was too awesome. The six women looked at each other. They already knew that Niu Yud was a soul formation stage master, so they didn't doubt that he would do what he said. The four men's faces were flushed red. They didn't dare to make the first move, so they definitely wanted to save face with their words. However, they were stopped by Fang Ming. Fang Ming was a smart man. He could tell that this person's words and actions weren't just for fun. His eyes were filled with indifference, as if he viewed human life as nothing more than grass. He would definitely kill anyone if they didn't get along. Most importantly, they might not be a match for this person. Why do you want to cause trouble for me again and again? Have I offended you in the past? Fang Ming asked loudly. It was a very smart question. The meaning behind it was obvious. He was telling everyone that this wasn't the first time this person had caused trouble for him. He was slandering him again. Those who saw the two arguing during the day also nodded slightly. They suspected that this Niu Yud was really causing trouble for Fang Ming. Cause trouble for you? Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. Do you think you're worth my trouble? If I really wanted to cause trouble for you, you would have lost your life long ago. How could you have the chance to swindle and deceive everyone? He was telling the truth. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to keep a low profile, he wouldn't have let Fang Ming off during the day. In his eyes, the people of the cultivation world had already obtained far more than mortals, especially those who harbored evil intentions. It was fine if they didn't cause trouble, but once they did, the harm they suffered would be much greater than that of mortals. Therefore, to him it was better to kill than to spare. The word sympathy was something he had never even thought about. However, he thought that he was low-key, but in reality, he was the kind of person who couldn't be low-key even if he wanted to. His entire body was covered with hard thorns that would stab people no matter where he was placed. With this kind of character, how could he keep a low profile? Who knows? I believe that you have the ability to kill me. Fang Ming glanced at the veiled woman beside the leaning mountain pavilion and said in a deep voice, You keep saying that I'm a liar, but you should at least show me the evidence. You can't accuse me of being a liar just because of what you said. That's a little too ridiculous. He could be considered to have swallowed his anger. Even after being ridiculed, he still maintained a certain degree of politeness. There was nothing he could do about it. The other party dared to turn against him, but he didn't dare to. Evidence? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and said, I've already said that I've heard Yu Qianqiu play and sing these two songs with my own ears. This is the best evidence. Then I'll have to trouble you to prove that you've heard Yu Qianqiu play and sing these two songs, Fang Ming said calmly. That's easy. Yu Qianqiu casually waved his hand and said, The last time I was still in Dayang City, Third Exan from Lingfang Valley brought Yu Qianqiu to visit me. At that time, the three of them were in high spirits after drinking, and the Thousand Sorrows Zither song livened up the mood. They played and sang more than 10 songs in a row, and those songs were like the sounds of nature, making people gasp in admiration. Among those songs you played and sang. If you don't believe me, you can go to Lingfang Valley and ask Third Xian. Then you'll know that I'm not lying. Fang Ming choked and was stunned. Asking him to look for Third Xian, he had to have the qualifications to do so. Who was Third Xian? He was an expert in the late tribulation passing stage. His brother was in the early soul forming stage, and his master was one of the 4 great men of the cultivation world. How could he have the qualifications to ask questions? It was already good enough that he could meet him. The itinerant cultivators looked at each other, trying to figure out Niu Yud's background. They had never heard of this person before, and even Third Xian and Yu Qianqiu wanted to visit him. It was obvious that he had an extraordinary background. Although Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing didn't say a word, their faces were filled with pride. The two of them basked in the glory of their boss and enjoyed the feeling of being the center of attention for the first time. In the past, even among the itinerant cultivators, the two of them were nameless people. How could they receive so much attention? This feeling was really good, as if he had followed the right person. Fang Ming wanted to say something, but stopped himself. In the end, he shut his mouth. Even if he was stubborn, he had to have the capital to do so. Not to mention that he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation. His background was even more mysterious. This kind of person was not someone a small itinerant cultivator like him could afford to offend. If he lost his life before he could eat the swan meat, it would be really not worth it. However, he saw a scene that he shouldn't have seen. Just as Nyo Yud was talking about third brother Exin, the masked woman next to the mountain-leaning pavilion with the green veil lightly took a few steps forward. With every step she took, the night breeze brushed against the green muslin. Under the influence of the wind, the green muslin skirt wrapped around the contours of her slender legs. The exquisite curves on her upper body were even more captivating. The hazy curves could make all things pale in comparison with each step she took. And each step was enough to stop one's breathing. Everyone followed Fong Ming's gaze and held their breaths, staring fixedly at the woman. Although this mysterious woman's face was covered, the green veil was unable to conceal the allure of her body as she moved. They did not see her devastatingly beautiful face, nor did they hear her melodious words. This was because she had not said a word since she arrived. There was no pretentiousness to deliberately display the charm of a woman. Everything was done so inadvertently. With a few graceful steps, she vividly interpreted the word beauty. The mountain-leaning pavilion under the night sky, the incandescent light, and the one-armed old man. Everything became an illusory background. Everyone's attention was focused on the woman in green veil. The bright moonlight was blocked by the drifting dark clouds, and the moon seemed to be too shy to peep at the woman below. Bonfires were lit everywhere, shining brightly. The burning firewood made crackling sounds, as if to remind everyone to come back to their senses. However, everyone was still immersed in a daze. After a long time, the group of people who had almost suffocated to death finally remembered the matter of breathing. They swallowed their saliva and took big gulps of air mixed with the fragrance of wine. However, their gazes were still fixed on the woman in green veil. Damn it! She could bring disaster to the country and people by not showing her face. This could be considered as putting the moon to shame. Yu Qianqiu, who came back to his senses, looked up at the sky and found that even the moon had disappeared. He drank a mouthful of wine, looked around at the group of people who were stunned, and shook his head with a bitter smile. In his mind, the few women who were waiting for his return appeared, and he felt that he owed them too much. The night wind was a little cold, but the bonfires were still burning. Yu Qianqiu's body leaned back slightly. He supported himself with one hand on his back, and one of his legs retracted. His other hand was placed on his knee, holding a jar of wine and gently shaking it. The wine was poured into his mouth from time to time, and the bright red light from the fire made the faint longing in his eyes and face unmistakable. The masked woman in green veil was watching his every move. When she found that he did not fit in with the crowd, her eyes revealed a trace of surprise. In her impression, there was no need to mention her own charm, and it was rare to see such a man. Of course, there was also that person, that arrogant legendary figure, who was also an exception. That person was too arrogant to the bones. However, that person did indeed have the qualifications to be arrogant to the point of ignoring everything. What beauty in his eyes was just a skeleton. When it was time to make a move, there was no reason to talk. So beautiful, Yanxia said dreamily, looking at the dazed looks of the men around her. She slightly lowered her head to look at the big chest that she was usually proud of, and subconsciously shrank her chest. For the first time, she found that it was really stupid to rely on big breasts to attract men's attention. Look at him. He just took a few steps, and the effect was far more attractive than her own chest. It is very beautiful. Yan Lan let out a sigh. After all, these women were women, so they were the first to come back to their senses, but their faces all showed a look of shame. The sound of the wine being drunk attracted the eyes of the women. The women were surprised to find that Senior Nyo Yud was indeed a master, and he was not on the same level as the stinky men around him. The charm of the masked woman was hard to resist even for women like them. Unexpectedly, Senior Nyo Yud did not even look at her, and drank leisurely by himself. He was really a knowledgeable senior. Sir, do you think that the masked woman is not beautiful? Yanxia was a little curious and dared to ask. The eyes of the women were cast together, and they also wanted to know the opinion of this senior. Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses and asked, "What?" Yanxia timidly asked the question again. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it and said, "It should be okay. Women are beautiful in my eyes, but I haven't seen her face. How do I know if she is beautiful or not?" Yanxia slightly pouted, as if she was not very satisfied with this answer, and asked again, "Does Sir only look at the face to see whether a woman is beautiful or not? Her figure is also very important." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. His eyes glanced at her chest, and then sent the wine jar in his hand to her sensitive part, and said with a smile, "Of course, the figure is very important. I like women with big breasts. Just looking at them makes me feel good, and taking them off is even more. Cough. That the figure is very important, and your figure is very beautiful, hee hee. Very beautiful, very beautiful." Chapter 538. Hazy Haze's face turned red. Under the light of the fire, it became more and more red. She covered her chest with her arms, trying to block Yu Qianqiu's gaze. She whispered, "I'm not talking about me." The other women were seduced by these words, and subconsciously looked at their chests. They also crossed their arms to cover their chests. Their cheeks were all red, and they all muttered in their hearts, "This senior Neo doesn't know how to restrain himself when acting like a hooligan." Many people's gazes had already been attracted by the three words big breasts. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were even more dumbfounded. The two of them really didn't expect that their boss would actually dare to say such a thing in front of so many people. They immediately threw the veiled beauty to the back of their minds and looked at this rare animal like their boss. "What are you looking at?" Yu Qianqiu glared at the two of them, and then awkwardly explained to Hazy Haze. "It was a slip of the tongue, a slip of the tongue. I absolutely didn't mean anything else." However, the figures of the women shrank a little bit to guard against thieves. Especially their eyes. They obviously didn't believe that he had made a slip of the tongue. "Damn. I obviously want to flatter you, but you actually treat me as a pervert." Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth and shook his head speechlessly. He was too lazy to explain, and he couldn't explain it clearly. Many people around him snickered, laughing that he was really a kindred spirit. If someone was more careful, they would find that the direction of the veiled woman's veil had changed a little. It seemed to be facing the direction of Yu Qianqiu. Obviously, she had noticed this Niu Yud. Fang Ming always paid attention to her movements, and naturally noticed this. Just now, the beauty of the mysterious woman's graceful steps had left an indelible mark in his heart. Before, he had the heart to climb high branches, but now he had the impulse to get close to her. This couldn't be blamed on him. A graceful lady was a gentleman's desire. Any normal man would like beautiful women. However, if he was jealous of a beautiful woman, he had to consider the consequences. Fang Mingben had already suppressed his irrational action of clashing with Yu Qianqiu, but after seeing the peerless elegance of this beautiful woman, his heart began to beat wildly. Even if this woman did not have a mysterious background, it would be enough to satisfy him for the rest of his life, if he could obtain her. Not to mention that she might have a profound background. Originally, there were already signs of success when the conditions were right, but this Niu Yud forcefully stopped it. Moreover, such a peerless beauty had actually shifted her attention from him to Niu Yud. This was intolerable. Fang Ming's face was livid and shouted, "Niu Yud, how dare you say such obscene words in public? Aren't you afraid of being a disgrace?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. Just now, he had thought that this fellow was tactful. He did not expect that this fellow would openly flip out at him. Yu Qianqiu did not know what was wrong with him. She sized him up in confusion and said, "That's strange. What does it have to do with you that I'm a disgrace to cultured people? I'm a disgrace to cultured people, so why are you a liar lecturing me? Heh, since you keep saying that I'm a liar, then show me something to prove it. Don't spout nonsense. Do you think everyone in the world is a fool?" Fang Ming threw caution to the wind. He was sure that the mysterious woman was also someone who loved music. Otherwise, she wouldn't have played the flute alone in this lonely night. Fang Ming's bet was very simple. As long as the veiled woman was a person who loved music, she would not put herself in danger. Because there was still a song to be sung. Did she not want to hear it? Moreover, the one-armed old man who guarded the ghost manor probably wouldn't allow anyone to commit murder in the ghost manner. Everyone broke out in a cold sweat for Fong Ming. Offending such a person was truly not a wise move. Fu Chun, Qin Jiaxing, and the girls looked at Fong Ming as if they were looking at an idiot. In their eyes, a mere vagrant cultivator dared to provoke a soul formation stage cultivator. Wasn't he courting death? Oh. Yu Qianqiu put down the wine jar in his hand and sat up straight. He raised his hand to touch his forehead helplessly. The copper bracelet on his wrist was very eye-catching. He said disdainfully, "I, Niu Yid, have always won people over with my virtue. Tell me, how can I prove it so that you will be convinced?" Fong Ming's face tensed up. "Niu Yid, I don't know if you know music or not, but since you insist on proving that I'm a liar, don't say that I'm making things difficult for you. If you can sing a song composed by Yu Qianqiu, then it will be a strong proof." He secretly prepared another excuse in his mind. If Yu Qianqiu really knew how to play and sing, and if it was the two songs that he had just sung, then he would say that Yu Qianqiu was merely imitating him. If it was another song, then no one here would have heard it. At that time, he could firmly deny that it was a song composed by Yu Qianqiu. "Oh, that's it. As long as I can sing a song composed by Yu Qianqiu, then I can prove that you're a liar?" Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. In his previous life, he was a master of conspiracies. Even if Niu Yid did not leave a way out, he had already prepared for the worst. He had seen many people like Niu Yid. He snorted coldly and said, "What if you don't admit that it's a song composed by Yu Qianqiu that no one has ever heard of before?" Fong Ming's thoughts were exposed, but he still gritted his teeth and said, "As long as you don't imitate someone else's song, then it'll be fine." Yu Qianqiu's song has a different tune than the one we're familiar with. You'll know it once you hear it. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard the sound of a lazy zither. Everyone looked toward the source of the sound. Unknowingly, a zither had appeared on Niu Yid's knees. He was casually playing with it with one hand. Everyone's eyes lit up. They knew that a good show was about to begin. Since Niu Yid could carry a zither with him, he must be an expert in this field. Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun looked at each other. Yan Lan and the other girls looked at each other. They didn't expect Niu Yid to really know how to play the zither. In the cultivation world, there weren't many male cultivators who were willing to spend their time on this field. Of course, those who were passionate about it were mostly female cultivators. This was because women were born to be sentimental. The pair of eyes under the green veil stared closely at Yu Qianqiu's every move, and a faint look of expectation appeared in them. Yu Qianqiu stared at Fong Ming with a faint smile. His fingers touched the strings of the zither, and he began to play with it elegantly and skillfully. A beautiful melody slowly flowed into everyone's heart. He sang softly, "I am a fox that has cultivated for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of cultivation, 1,000 years of loneliness." Everyone was familiar with this song and the tune. However, it was clearly more emotional than Fong Ming's song. There were many subtle differences, but it was more provocative. Even if they didn't understand, they could tell that Niu Yid's singing was better than Fong Ming's. This was a very normal thing. It was a song that was passed down from the mouth of Yu Qianqiu. It would be strange if Yu Qianqiu himself was not familiar with it. There were no recording devices in this era, so it wasn't a big deal if the song was lost. However, it showed everyone what an authentic song was. Fong Ming's face changed color. After playing and singing for a short while, Yu Qianqiu changed his tune midway. He sang again. Since the beginning, only the newlyweds smile, who would hear the old cry. The word love is so hard. Should I ask for the truth? Or should I pretend to be confused? It's hard to be content with knowing too much. The tune was so skillfully switched between the two songs, and it was so perfect and beautiful, that it made people secretly fascinated. However, after a few more lines, the sound of the zither changed again. It was no longer affectionate, and had become aggressive. Yu Qianqiu's 10 fingers strummed the zither strings as he stared at Fong Ming, and said in an indifferent tone, "People strive to climb higher and water flows lower. If you want to climb higher and change your fate, no one will say anything. A fair lady is a gentleman's dream, and you're right. However, you're blind to think that everyone in the world is as gullible as fools. You're too naive." Fong Ming, if you have the guts to do it, you should be prepared to bear the consequences. If you admit that you're a liar now, I'll spare your life. Fong Ming glanced at the doubtful gazes around him and said unwillingly, these are clearly the 2 songs that I played earlier. You made some slight changes to them, and you're calling me a liar? Who's the naive one here? Humph. I knew you would say that. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sneered. With the movement of his fingers, the tune suddenly became impassioned, and the audience's mood became bolder. Yu Qianqiu stared at his fingers and said without looking up, this is a song Yu Qianqiu composed for me. Not many people have heard it. On this lonely night, it's fate that we met. I'm willing to play this song for everyone free of charge. I'll sing this song to raise everyone's spirits. Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up again, and they were filled with anticipation. Her red lips pursed under the green veil, which was a rare sight. Fong Ming, I'll give you one last chance. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and stared at him. Towards this guy who claimed that Yu Qianqiu was a peerless genius, Yu Qianqiu wanted to give him some face. However, it was better for him to show off his talent in front of a beauty. Although Yu Qianqiu wasn't interested in the veiled beauty, it didn't stop him from satisfying his vanity. After all, there were few men who wouldn't be willing to be worshipped by a beauty. This was also the main reason why he came out to sing for free, since he had nothing better to do. Moreover, he believed that the guy's singing skills were indeed inferior to his. Since he wanted to promote Yu Qianqiu as a peerless genius, he might as well let Nyoye do it for him. He was sure that the audience would be satisfied, and the peerless genius Yu Qianqiu would also be satisfied. However, the result of his action was that Fong Ming was doomed to be unlucky. However, Yu Qianqiu didn't like this guy who pretended to be cool, so he wouldn't help him. It was already good enough that he was willing to give Fong Ming a chance and a way out. Fong Ming sighed. It wasn't easy for him to get a chance to show off today. Why did he have to meet Nyoye, who appeared out of nowhere? Was this really his fate? Although he had a vague feeling that something was wrong, he was blinded by greed. He forced himself to be calm and said, true gold fears no fire, and justice is in the hearts of people. Chapter 539. He was stubborn, but his 4 brothers started to feel uneasy. To survive in the cultivation world until now, avoiding the strong and the weak was one of the rules of survival. This Nyoye was obviously unfathomable. They couldn't understand why Fong Ming was so stubborn. Was it worth taking such a big risk? Justice exists in the hearts of people. Yu Qianqiu's fingers danced nonstop on the zither. He sneered and said, if justice exists in the hearts of people, why would there be a distinction between the secular world and the cultivation world? Everyone has justice in their hearts, and there's no need for us to risk our lives fighting and killing. Every man for himself is the most suitable phrase to be used in the cultivation world. His words caused the bonfire to fall into silence. Only the sound of the zither could be heard. Everyone was reflecting on their past experiences in the cultivation world. Truly, every man for himself was the definition of every man for himself. Many people sighed softly and poured the strong liquor down their throats. Your way of thinking is too one-sided and extreme. For example, this old senior. Fong Ming righteously waved his hand and pointed at the one-armed old man in the leaning mountain pavilion. He said passionately, not to mention his profound cultivation base, he has been silently maintaining the ghost village for countless years. He has not allowed the ghost village to fall into ruins. He has also provided a place for us wandering cultivators to stay. Can you say that this old senior's actions are also every man for himself? Nice bootlicking. I hope he can save your life in the future. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him disdainfully and ignored him. His fingers danced on the zither, producing an infinitely melancholic tune. He looked around and said with a faint smile, there's wine today, so let's get drunk today. When we meet again in the future, we will be passers-by. Nyoye will present a song to relieve the boredom of fellow wandering cultivators. As soon as he finished speaking, his fingers suddenly danced wildly on the zither, producing a messy noise that made everyone's teeth go numb. Everyone looked at him with bared teeth. Just now he was talking about warming people's hearts. Why did he turn into a disgusting person in the blink of an eye? Fangming frowned under the green veil. Fangming was secretly happy. So he was just pretending. Just when everyone's emotions were in a mess, the ear-piercing noise came to an abrupt end. Just as everyone relaxed and heaved a sigh of relief, a beautiful melody that was interwoven with ding-ding-dong-dong slowly entered everyone's hearts. It was like when one was unbearably hot in a hot summer and was suddenly wrapped in a cool and refreshing feeling. It made one heave a sigh of relief, and at the same time, it was so comfortable that one could not help but want to let out a groan. As the sound of the zither gradually opened the hearts of the people, they heard Yu Qianqiu reciting in a bleak tone. The winds and clouds of the world originate from my generation. Once I enter Jianghu, time flies. 1,000 years of cultivation, chatting and laughing, can't compare to a drunken life. The night breeze was cool, the bonfire was bright, and the crackling sound of the firewood could not pull everyone out of their trance. With just a few lines, everyone followed the melody and stepped into the turbulent cultivation world in an instant. The past was still vivid in their minds, and the rogue cultivators could not bear to look back. Complacency and frustration appeared before their eyes one by one, and how much blood and tears were mixed in them. How much did they give up, and how much did they gain? Did they give up more or did they gain more? They did not know how long this dream would last. They also did not know if these years of hard searching were worth it. Can't compare to a drunken life, many people casually muttered, then shook their heads with a bitter smile and sighed. How could they relieve their worries? Only the mellow and strong wine. The rogue cultivators sitting around the bonfire rose and fell with the prelude of the zither, and the cool wine went straight down their throats. For a moment, the fragrance of the wine wafted everywhere, making the night full of bonfire and confused but clear, and worthy of eternal remembrance. Can't compare to a drunken life? Everyone knew that they could not be so free and easy, but tonight, they could get drunk. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at Yu Qianqiu with their mouths wide open, as if they did not recognize him. Was this still the boss from before? They had followed Yu Qianqiu for a period of time, and they knew that this boss was cruel and merciless, and he would kill at the slightest provocation. Moreover, he often used vulgar words like father and mother. It was hard to imagine that he could say such words with deep meaning. Moreover, looking at his elegance and the romantic way he played the zither, it was quite scary. Are we hallucinating? Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other in disbelief. Yan Lan and the other girls' eyes were full of little stars, and they were full of splendor. They all bent their knees and rested their chins on their hands, staring at him with their blurred eyes. This man could really make women fall for him. His eyes under the green veil, although they were moving, they were as calm as before. But now they were rippling, as if a small stone had been thrown into a pool of stagnant water. And it made people's hearts fluctuate, and it was difficult to calm down. Fangming suddenly came to his senses, and he stared at Yu Qianqiu with an unpredictable expression. Yu Qianqiu, who was playing the zither, also gave him a disdainful look. That's right, Yu Qianqiu was indeed looking down on him. How dare you pretend to be elegant in front of me? Elegant is bullsh*t. It's only for people who have nothing better to do. Who has ever seen someone who can't even fill his stomach pretending to be elegant? Elegant, you son of a b*tch. I can do whatever I want. And I've already stopped playing. Today, I'll let you see what it means to pretend to be elegant. Playing the zither, singing and reciting poems, haven't you seen it before? This is called being overflowing with talent. Yu Qianqiu had deliberately played the zither before. And it wasn't just on a whim. Because everyone had already listened to a few songs, it was as if they had eaten too much delicious food. And now they were being served another delicious dish. If everyone wanted to taste the authentic taste, they would need a cup of plain water to wash away the residue on their taste buds, so that they wouldn't taste mixed. As for Yu Qianqiu's violent and random flicking, it was like a cup of tasteless plain water, completely washing away the lingering aftertaste in everyone's minds. After doing this, he began to show off proudly. He snatched this romantic night that belonged to Fangming into his own hands. While everyone was still sighing, they heard Yu Qianqiu reciting sonorously with the zither. Riding on a sword to traverse heaven and earth, White bones fly like startled birds. The world is like a tide, and people are like water. But how many people return to the martial world? He added a slight sigh at the end, feeling a little sad about parting. The world is like a tide, and people are like water. But how many people return to the martial world? The rogue cultivators repeated it over and over again, thinking back to when they first entered the cultivation world. Everyone was still simple, and everyone had a few good friends. But who could survive? Even if they were still alive, who could still maintain that innocence? Deceiving each other to save their own lives. How many people returned to the martial world? Suddenly, someone stood up, threw the wine jar in his hand into the distance, and roared under the night sky. Cultivation world, you son of a bitch! That person gradually closed his eyes, and 2 streaks of tears slid down his beard, glowing under the light of the bonfire. This person was none other than the mid-stage nascent soul cultivator Tianyi. Perhaps he was thinking of his relatives and friends who no longer existed. The eyes of the 2 people beside him were also red, and they didn't say anything. They only knew how to pour the wine into their mouths. Next to the mountain pavilion, under the illumination of the incandescent lamp, behind the green gauze curtain, her red lips moved slightly, and an almost inaudible voice came out. Riding on a sword to traverse heaven and earth, white bones fly like startled birds. The world is like a tide, and people are like water. But how many people return to the martial world? It seemed to be the first time this mysterious woman spoke. Her voice was mellow, like silver beads falling on a plate, crisp and pleasant to the ear. Unfortunately, the cultivation of the people below could not hear it. Only the old man behind her heard it. The one-armed old man slowly turned his head to look at Yu Qianqiu, and his calm eyes were a little dim, as if he was peeling away the night sky and looking at the distant past. Ha! A burst of wild and carefree laughter suddenly sounded under the night sky, and the bonfire suddenly flickered. Everyone was startled and looked over, and it was Yu Qianqiu laughing with his head facing the sky. The sound of the zither also became carefree and leisurely, and his 10 fingers were as bright as a blooming lotus, freely moving on the strings. The carefree and leisurely sound of the zither seemed to be warning everyone that since the past was unbearable to look back on, why not just let it go and laugh it off? The sound of the zither suddenly surged, and everyone's emotions fluctuated along with it. Suddenly, they heard Yu Qianqiu sing loudly. The ocean laughs, the surging tides on both sides, floating and sinking with the waves, remembering the present. The heavens laughs, the tides of the world. Only God knows who wins and who loses. The rivers and mountains laugh. The misty rain is far away. The waves wash away the mortal world. How many do you know in the secular world? The cool breeze laughs, actually provoking loneliness. The heroic spirit is still there in the evening. La 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 ha ha. The song surged in the wilderness. Although it was night, the moon was bright, and the stars were sparse, but everyone's state of mind was instantly brought into another world. Under the bright sky, laughing alone at the ups and downs of the ocean, laughing at the vicissitudes of life like floating clouds, fighting for fame and wealth like passing clouds. How many people in the cultivation world live in fear and anxiety? How can it be as carefree as watching the sunset with a wisp of cool breeze? Yu Qianqiu's 10 fingers, the unrestrained singing, and the wild and hearty laughter dazzled Yin Lan and the other girls, and they couldn't help but fall into a trance. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were dumbfounded, and they really suspected that their boss was possessed by something unclean. Inside the pavilion, the one-armed old man's cold eyes gradually melted. Beside the pavilion, the blue muslin on the bridle fluttered without any wind. The pair of eyes inside stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was indulging himself. Her soft red lips moved slightly, and she murmured to herself, "The rivers and mountains laugh, the misty rain is far away." Is this a song composed by Yu Qianqiu? The common people laugh, no longer lonely, the heroic spirit is still there. As Yu Qianqiu sang, he couldn't help himself, and he gradually got into the mood. He seemed to be crazily singing to his heart's content. His wild and unrestrained manner really stirred people's hearts. Not to mention the others, they all swayed their upper bodies along with the song, and their flying swords clanked again. Together with the music, they sang along with Yu Qianqiu. The ocean laughs, the surging tides on both sides, floating and sinking with the waves, remembering the present. This song was both heroic and catchy, suitable for these men to vent their emotions. After being led to sing a few times, they all sang very well. Under the night sky, beside the piles of bonfires, the fragrance of wine mixed with the wild singing drifted in the wilderness. The veiled woman beside the pavilion raised her flute and gently placed it next to her lips. Chapter 540. Woo woo, the flute sounded again. It floated in the night sky, but it was not as lonely as it was the first time. The melodious sound of the flute was intertwined with the music of the zither. The lingering sound of the wild and gentle accompaniment immediately enhanced the gentleness and heroism of the song. It vividly displayed the charm of laughing mountains and rivers, drifting in the misty rain. The night wind seemed to be stirred up as it blew towards them, fluttering their clothes and making the bonfire flicker. The music of the zither and the flute was perfect, and it was a rare song to be heard in the world. Yan Lan and the other girls' hair danced in the wind, but they still stared at Yu Qianqiu, as if the lingering sound of the flute was also produced by the strings of the zither under his fingers. They didn't think that it was someone else who was playing the flute, because the flute's insertion point was just right. Those who were immersed in it felt that the music was even more beautiful and emotional. However, Yu Qianqiu noticed it. He kept playing the zither with his fingers to cooperate with the people who were singing loudly. He turned his head and looked at the veiled girl who was playing the flute beside the pavilion. The night wind came at the right time, wrapping around the mysterious girl's graceful figure. The green veil covering her face was blown up. Although her face was not exposed, half of her smooth and round forehead was already revealed. Yu Qianqiu stared at her, but he didn't know that the eyes under the green veil were also looking at him. Fingers plucking the strings and lips playing the flute, they cooperated so well. It was as if they had a telepathic connection, and their hearts were connected to each other. Everything was understood without words. A few strands of affection were quietly brewing in their eyes. Fang Ming was probably the only one among the rogue cultivators who wasn't immersed in it. He was slightly absent-minded, but he immediately woke up when he heard the flute. Now that he saw that the mysterious girl was playing the flute together with Niu Yud, he would be lying if he said he wasn't jealous. But what could he do about it? He could only keep it in his heart. Fang Ming's eyes fell on the four people who were singing loudly. He was hesitant, but then a trace of determination flashed across his eyes. With light footsteps, he slowly retreated to the periphery. He did not dare to move too much, wanting to leave before the crowd came back to their senses. It wasn't that he didn't want to call his four brothers to go with him, but he was afraid that it would alarm the others. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to escape at all. This was because he had given up the last chance that Niu Yud had given him. It wasn't like he was the one who started the practice of the cultivation world abandoning their peers to save their own lives. However, he had left a little too late. If he had left while Yu Qianqiu was still immersed in playing and singing, he might have really let him escape. But now that Yu Qianqiu was awake, with his cultivation, how could Fang Ming escape from under his nose? Yu Qianqiu glanced out of the corner of his eyes and caught sight of Fang Ming gradually retreating. His eyes narrowed and a cold smile appeared on his lips. Although he had done a lot of despicable things, he had never done something like abandoning his brothers. Ha 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 ha. The sound of the zither rang out violently, startling the people who were singing loudly. They woke up with a start and looked at Yu Qianqiu. The gentle sound of the flute also stopped. Niu Yud stood up and threw the zither into his storage bag. He stared at a direction and said in a low voice, "Fang Ming, where do you think you're going?" Fang Ming stopped in his tracks and slowly turned around. He said nonchalantly, "Niu Yud, what do you mean by that? Do I have to tell you where I want to go? This is the ghost village, not your home. No matter how powerful you are, it's not up to you to make decisions here." Everyone's eyes focused on him. They were not idiots. Based on what had happened before, they naturally guessed that Fang Ming wanted to escape. His four brothers stared at him in silence. Their expressions were very complicated. "I don't make decisions about other things. and I'm too lazy to make decisions. But your life. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and pointed at him. He said indifferently, I gave you one last chance, but you didn't want it. The moment I played this song, your life no longer belonged to you. Fang Ming naturally wouldn't sit and wait for death. Even ants wanted to live, let alone humans. His chest heaved up and down as he said, Niu Yud, who can prove that the song you're singing is definitely composed by Yu Qianqiu? Everyone understood what he meant, but they could also tell that he was being shameless. At the very least, they all believed that the song was composed by Yu Qianqiu. I've long guessed that you're not only a liar, but also a scoundrel, Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly. But I, Niu Yud, not only like to win people over with my virtue, I also like to be a ruthless judge. People like you deserve to die. I sentence you to death. What do you want? Fang Ming was shocked. He originally thought that Niu Yud would have some misgivings in the ghost manner, so he was prepared to use his mouth. But looking at Niu Yud's expression, it seemed like he wanted to use force. Thus, he moved towards the mountain-leaning pavilion and said, This is the ghost manor. It's not your turn to mess around. He looked at the one-armed old man for help. He also knew that Niu Yud's cultivation was higher than his, so he couldn't escape. He could only place his hope on the one-armed old man guarding the ghost manor. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. His body moved with a whoosh. He slid across the short grass on the ground, bypassing the campfires and the crowd, and directly approached Fang Ming. Amidst the clamor of the crowd, Fang Ming turned pale with fright and released a flying sword. He jumped on it and flew towards the mountain-leaning pavilion. His only chance of survival was there, so where else could he run to? But how could his nascent soul stage's speed be faster than Yu Qianqiu's? In an instant, the sound of something breaking through the air was getting closer. Fang Ming was scared out of his wits as he cried out in fear. Senior, save me! Senior, save me! Young lady, save me! His cry stopped abruptly. Yu Qianqiu leaped into the air and slapped his palm behind him. Fang Ming's body emitted a cloud of white smoke, which was quickly absorbed into Yu Qianqiu's palm. Immediately after, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and unleashed a gust of astral wind. With a pu sound, Fang Ming instantly turned into dust. All the rogue cultivators were so shocked that they couldn't speak. They didn't even see what happened. Just 2 palms. 2 palms were enough to turn a nascent soul stage cultivator's bones into dust. Not even a piece of him could be seen. What kind of spell was this? It was too terrifying. Everyone didn't see it, but the veiled woman and the one-armed old man saw it clearly. Fang Ming was clearly turned into a dried-up skeleton by Niu Yud's palm, and then turned into dust by another palm. Absorbing Star's great technique. The veiled woman's delicate body slightly trembled. Her red lips under the azure veil murmured, It really is him. If the first sentence was heard by Yu Qianqiu, he would definitely be very surprised. Although it wasn't the first time he used the Absorbing Star's great technique, the number of people who knew about it could be counted on one hand. At least no woman knew about it. After the one-armed old man clearly saw the power of this palm, his pupils rapidly shrank. There was no doubt in his eyes that he was shocked. After Fang Ming died, the flying sword under his feet still rushed towards the leaning mountain pavilion. The one-armed old man teleported in front of the veiled woman and conveniently grabbed the flying sword. Teleportation. Yu Qianqiu stared deeply at the one-armed old man. He had no intention of colliding with these 2 unknown people. His body turned in the air and immediately rushed towards Fang Ming's 4 brothers. After the 4 of them witnessed Fang Ming's tragic death, they were stunned. Suddenly, they realized that the person was rushing towards them. They were so scared that they immediately jumped up and ran. However, just as the 4 of them jumped up, they discovered that they were already surrounded by a qi dynamic. Yu Qianqiu flew backward in the air and slammed his palm toward the 4 people below. For streams of white smoke rushed into his palm with a whooshing sound. Since he had already made his move, he didn't mind carrying the crime of killing the innocent. He wanted to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Everyone raised their heads and saw the 4 sounds of the palm. Suddenly, they heard a rushing sound that pierced through the air. He turned around and saw that the one-armed old man in the leaning mountain pavilion had made a move. Fong Ming's flying sword left his hand, leaving behind a magnificent silver light. It was accompanied by the faint sound of wind and thunder as it shot toward Yu Qianqiu, who was in midair. A strong wind followed the flying sword, and wherever it went, the bonfire would be extinguished. The people below felt their faces hurt from the strong wind. From the looks of it, the two experts were about to fight. No one dared to sit still. It wouldn't be fun if they got caught in the crossfire. They scattered like birds and beasts. They didn't even have time to hide. Even if they wanted to watch the show, they had to stay far away. Yu Qianqiu had just finished off the four people with one palm strike when he saw the flying sword coming towards him. In an instant it was right in front of him. When the flying sword was still a few meters away, the strong wind had already hit him. He almost couldn't stand still in the air. He was shocked. This old man's cultivation was so high. Without another word, he leaped into the air again. Activating the metal art, he slapped the flying sword that had just brushed past him. Bang! The flying sword that was wrapped in the strong wind could no longer withstand the pressure. It exploded into a cloud of silver dust and flew everywhere. The bonfire below was extinguished by the wind, and the four dried corpses turned into dust on the spot. Under the green veil, the black eyebrows slightly furrowed. It was understandable that Yu Qianqiu killed Fong Ming, but he didn't even let the four people go. She couldn't stand it anymore. She had been merciful all her life and hated killing the innocent. The one-armed old man's eyes flickered when he saw that his flying sword had been reduced to dust by Yu Qianqiu's palm. A fearless battle intent gradually overflowed from his body as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. The ghost's manner didn't allow people to cause trouble. However, Fong Ming had offended someone he shouldn't have, so he didn't stop Niu Yid from killing Fong Ming. However, after Niu Yid killed Fong Ming, he turned around and killed four people. He simply didn't respect the ghost manor's guardian at all. Since he broke the rules here, he naturally had to teach him a lesson. However, he didn't expect Niu Yid to be able to shatter the flying sword he released with one palm strike. Moreover, it was shattered. This cultivation was quite frightening. He was confident that he could also easily shatter a normal flying sword with one palm strike. However, it was impossible for him to shatter a flying sword into dust. He now suspected that Niu Yid was a soul formation stage expert who was hiding his identity and purposely came to cause trouble. This was because even he couldn't see through Niu Yid's cultivation. One could only imagine Niu Yid's cultivation. For a moment his battle intent soared. However, just as he slowly moved half a step, he suddenly heard a soft sigh. The voice transmitted, "Forget it. This person's background isn't simple. He also has a deep relationship with Nongzhu. Let him go." "Miss, do you know this person?" The one-armed old man was startled. He transmitted his voice back. "Who is he?" Chapter 541. "If I'm not wrong, he's Yu Qianqiu." The mysterious woman transmitted her voice. "He's Yu Qianqiu? How can he have such a high cultivation?" However, his ruthless style of doing things is similar to that fella in the legends. The one-armed old man said in disbelief. Yu Qianqiu has been the person that the loose cultivators talked about the most during this period of time. To think that he dared to come here under such circumstances. He's quite bold. What's real and what's fake? I wonder which one is the real one, the mysterious woman muttered. "Miss, what did you say?" the one-armed elder asked in surprise. He didn't understand what she meant. She had just said that this person was Yu Qianqiu. Why couldn't she tell the real one from the fake one now? Yu Qianqiu hovered in the air and narrowed his eyes at the one-armed elder. He was prepared to fight. What made him wary was that he didn't know how high this mysterious elder's cultivation was. When the other party casually swung out his sword, there was a faint sound of wind and thunder. This was something he had never seen before, even when fighting against cultivators at the late tribulation stage. Could this old fellow be at the soul formation stage? Yu Qianqiu was slightly alarmed. He secretly locked onto Utopia with his divine sense. If he couldn't do it, he would leave. What surprised him was that after the one-armed elder attacked, he only looked at him deeply before turning and retreating to the side. As for the mysterious veiled woman, she leisurely rose into the air like Chang, flying to the moon. When she rose into the air, the veil on her head tilted slightly. Yu Qianqiu could clearly sense that the woman was looking at him. Following that, a green figure disappeared into the night sky. What was this woman's background? And what was the relationship between the one-armed elder and them? Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure it out. In the pavilion, the one-armed elder was drinking alone under the incandescent lamp. He was holding the wine jar that Yu Qianqiu had given him. It was as if nothing had happened. Damn it! If I had known earlier, I would have poisoned the wine and let you drink slowly. Yu Qianqiu gnashed his teeth in hatred. He thought to himself, old man, don't be so smug. This wine isn't that tasty. Floating in the air, he transmitted his voice to Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing. Go back. His figure immediately shot into the ghost's manor. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing glanced at each other. Previously, Boss had said that he was in the core formation stage, but later on, it was shown that his cultivation level was far higher than that. The fact that he could fly in the air was proof enough. Now he simply used the voice transmission technique, which could only be done by cultivators at the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. The two of them were a little excited, because with the protection of such an expert, ordinary people in the cultivation world wouldn't dare to touch them in the future. This was equivalent to a big backer. The two of them did not dare to hesitate, and quickly chased after him on their swords. Yan Lan and the other girls nodded and followed him. The rogue cultivators in the surroundings looked at each other. They never expected that someone would dare to make a move in the ghost's manor. Someone asked, who knows the two rogue cultivators following Niu Yud? I think I've seen them somewhere before. The taller one is called Fu Chun, and the shorter one is called Qin Jiaxing. They are just small fries in the foundation building stage. TSK, what kind of dog*T luck did these two fellows run into? They actually managed to find such a powerful backer. Another person replied. Everyone who was listening revealed an envious expression. They were very, very envious, not just envious. Although the identity of a cultivator in a famous sect had many benefits, and everyone was eager to join it. However, the founders of those famous sects were almost all rogue cultivators. Moreover, they were talented rogue cultivators. There was no other reason. Most of the cultivators who came from sects followed the cultivation methods of their sects step by step. Within the framework drawn by their ancestors, very few could surpass their ancestors. Although the life of a rogue cultivator was hard and tiring, those talented rogue cultivators were different. They all relied on their extremely high talent to walk a path that belonged to them. Only then could they establish their own sects and compete with the cultivators in the world. Among the top 10 cultivators in the world, which one of them wasn't a rogue cultivator? Among the rogue cultivators, they had never heard of someone named Niu Yud. However, judging from his powerful skills in various situations today, he might also be a talented rogue cultivator. To be able to follow such a person, once he established his own sect, the person who followed him would definitely have an extraordinary status in the sect. How could those rogue cultivators who had attached themselves to famous sects and clans compare to them? That was why everyone envied Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing. If they could befriend each other now, they might have a way out in the future. What surprised Yu Qianqiu was that the ruthless magistrate that he casually mentioned became Niu Yud's nickname. Moreover, because of his fight with the one-armed old man, it didn't take long for the news to spread throughout the cultivation world. Returning to the small courtyard with 6 rooms, Yu Qianqiu sent the 6 girls away and called Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing to his room. Seeing that he was serious, the two of them couldn't help but look at each other. They didn't know why their boss was looking for them. Yu Qianqiu took out 2 storage bags and threw them to the two of them. The two of them caught the bags and looked at each other. Then, they immediately injected their divine senses into the bags. If they didn't look, they wouldn't know. Once they saw it, they were shocked. Their eyes widened and they couldn't speak. There were so many spirit stones in the bags. For them, it was indeed a lot. They had never seen so many spirit stones in their lives. The two of them looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. They didn't know why he gave them so many spirit stones. There are 2 million top-grade spirit stones in each storage bag. It's enough for you to use. Yu Qianqiu smiled. For us? The two of them asked almost at the same time. Don't worry. Yu Qianqiu took out 2 purple true restriction breaking pills and threw them to the two of them. It's your luck that you met me. Today, I'll help you break through to the early stage of tribulation passing. The two of them were dumbfounded. They thought they had heard wrong. Cultivation was about progressing step by step. The two of them were only in the middle stage of foundation establishment. How could they break through to the early stage of tribulation passing? Don't doubt me. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the purple spirit pills in their hands and said, the spirit pills in your hands are called restriction breaking pills. They were made according to a recipe passed down from ancient times. Because the spirit herbs needed to make them are extremely difficult to gather, they have never appeared in the cultivation world. That's why very few people know about them. Although the two of them didn't have high cultivation levels, when they saw the halo on the spirit pills, they were a bit confused. Just by looking at the quality of the spirit pills, it was obvious that they were made by a top-notch alchemist. A normal alchemist would have a hard time making spirit pills with a halo. Fu Chun held it in her hands and said excitedly, Boss, do you mean that this restriction-breaking pill can increase a person's cultivation level? Qin Jiaxing smelled the fragrance of the spirit pills obsessively. Take the spirit pills, catalyze the medicinal properties, and then absorb the spiritual energy inside the spirit stones. When the time comes, you will know if I'm telling the truth. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and said, Give it a try. Yes, yes. The two of them nodded. They were so excited that they didn't know what to say. Without hesitation, they stuffed the spirit pills into their mouths and sat down cross-legged to regulate their breathing. The two of them didn't have the slightest doubt, because they felt that their boss had no reason to harm them. Moreover, with their status, neither of them was worth 2 million high-grade spirit stones. Spending 4 million high-grade spirit stones to harm insignificant people like them would be more likely to be crazy. With their boss's cultivation level, it would be easy for him to kill them. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Not long after, the two of them started to turn red. Hot air came out of their mouths and noses. They couldn't help but tremble. They looked like they were in pain. Yu Qianqiu said in a low voice, Hurry up and absorb the spirit stones. The two of them trembled and quickly took out the spirit stones from their storage pouches to absorb the spirit stones. One after another. Not long after, the painful expression on their faces became comfortable. At the same time, there was a hint of surprise, as if they enjoyed this feeling. 2 hours later, the two of them opened their eyes one after another. They looked at each other and jumped up. Qin Jiaxing stammered, I broke through to the late stage of foundation establishment. Fu Chun was also excited. Me too. Calm down. What will make you excited is yet to come. Yu Qianqiu sat on a chair and said disapprovingly. He placed 2 piles of spirit pills on the side table. In each pile were 7 purple limit-breaking pills and 3 colorful spirit pills with the halo of a rainbow-colored pill. The latter was the 7 treasures pill made from the rainbow-colored Lingji. It was the best spirit pill for breaking through bottlenecks. From foundation establishment to core formation, nascent soul, and tribulation passing stage, there are 3 bottlenecks. These 3 rainbow-colored spirit pills are rare spirit pills for breaking through bottlenecks. You can take 1 for each bottleneck. Yu Qianqiu smiled and knocked on the table. Each of you take 1 pile. It should help you break through to the early stage of tribulation passing stage. Damn it! I have spirit stones and spirit pills. Don't let me down. The two of them were so excited that they didn't know what to say. Happiness came too suddenly. They never thought such a good thing could happen. They thought they were dreaming. Fu Chun took a deep breath and bowed. Fu Chun will obey your orders from now on. Then she calmly took the 10 spirit pills that belonged to her. Qin Jiaxing stared blankly for a moment before he quickly bowed and saluted. Qin Jiaxing will definitely listen to boss's instructions from now on. Then he quickly took the pills on the tea table. Yu Qianqiu smiled and didn't say anything. He raised his hand and gestured for them to continue. The two of them looked at each other and stood side by side. They bowed to him again and continued to take the spirit pills to absorb the spirit qi. After the two of them closed their eyes, Yu Qianqiu's face became expressionless, and his fingers tapped on the surface of the coffee table. The purple restriction-breaking pill that the two of them had consumed was the same as the one that most of the members of Utopia had consumed. It could rapidly raise one's cultivation to the early stage of tribulation passing. The only flaw of this pill was that although it could help speed up cultivation, the person who took this pill would only be able to reach the late stage of tribulation passing stage. There was almost no hope of breaking through to the soul formation stage. The white restriction breaking pill could avoid this flaw. But there was another flaw. Every time they took one, they would be stiff and unable to move for a month. If the two of them took the white restriction breaking pill, they would need at least 8 months to break through to the early stage of tribulation passing stage. What he lacked the most right now was time. It was urgent. Chapter 542. Jumping out of the Chinese cultivation world was a hasty decision. At first, he was worried that he had made the wrong move. But now, he could confidently tell himself that this trip was worth it. He learned many things he didn't know. It also gave him a very serious sense of crisis. Looking at the problem from this perspective, he had a lot of feelings about the overall situation of the cultivation world. Previously, when he made a ruckus in the closed Chinese cultivation world, he was indeed a frog at the bottom of a well. The outside world was very vast and spectacular. There were indeed many experts in the cultivation world. There were many things that the Chinese cultivation world couldn't come into contact with. Combining the situation of the Chinese cultivation world and the countries here, he could now say with certainty that the Chinese cultivation world was definitely not a match for the combined forces of the various countries. Not to mention the soul formation experts. Just the final stage tribulation passing experts alone were countless. The various countries didn't even use their true strength in the war against the Chinese cultivation world. Why was it like this? Yu Qianqiu felt a lingering fear just thinking about it. It was obvious that they were waiting for something. For Bai Changchun to go to the Eastern Holy Land. Yu Qianqiu now truly understood Master Bai Changchun's position in the cultivation world. As long as Bai Changchun was still in the cultivation world, the entire world wouldn't be chaotic. Perhaps Bai Changchun only needed a glance to scare all the experts in the world into trembling with fear. No one would dare to move. Baikong's cultivation was high, right? The World Commerce Association's power was great, right? He still kept a low profile, afraid of angering a certain someone. Even if he didn't say anything, and just watched coldly from the demon ghost region. Whether it was this late-stage soul formation expert, or that late-stage soul formation expert, who would dare to use the full strength of their country to attack the Chinese cultivation world. No one dared to step forward. That number one expert in the world definitely didn't blink when he killed people. His iron-blooded methods had already deterred the entire world. Who could make all the soul formation experts in the world obediently gather together with just one word? Thinking about it, it could only be Bai Changchun. Yu Qianqiu even suspected that the so-called East Sea War was just his master deliberately trying to scare those so-called experts. Because the rumors of the star bead appeared too suddenly, the experts from various countries were all restless. At that time, Bai Changchun went on a killing spree and killed more than 10 deity transformation stage experts in a row. Immediately, everyone was so frightened that they didn't dare to act blindly without thinking, and all of them became well-behaved. Just to prevent soul formation experts from interfering in the war? If it was before he came to the various countries, Yu Qianqiu might have believed this saying. But now he didn't believe it. Did Bai Changchun not know the strength of each country? Even if the soul formation experts didn't intervene, the Chinese cultivation world wouldn't be a match for the combined forces of the various countries. Wouldn't the Battle of the East Sea be unnecessary? Bai Changchun shouldn't be such a boring person, right? Why didn't the other countries attack the Chinese cultivation world? They only sent people to test the waters. Clearly, Bai Changchun's threat in the East Sea was effective. Although he said that the other soul formation cultivators wouldn't intervene, he wouldn't intervene either. However, he had shown that he wanted to protect the Chinese cultivation world. Who would dare to bite the bullet and come? Wouldn't that be courting death? Yu Qianqiu now had a bold guess. The rumor about the star orb came so suddenly that Bai Changchun didn't seem to expect it. But he suddenly gathered all the soul formation experts in the world to threaten them. But he didn't invite the second strongest expert in the world, Wen Lanfeng. When he was about to leave the monster ghost region, and there was no successor for the torture envoy, he left Wen Lanfeng behind. Could it be that the old man decided to let Wen Lanfeng inherit the position of the torture envoy of the monster ghost region? Thinking back to the last time at the Baiwan embassy in Dayang City, Nongzhu had told Wen Rui why Bai Changchun didn't invite Wen Lanfeng to the East Sea. However, Nongzhu hesitated and didn't explain it. It seemed that there was some hidden reason. Judging from this, the possibility was very high. In the cultivation world, apart from Bai Changchun, it seemed that only Wen Lanfeng could intimidate the heroes of the world. However, his sudden appearance seemed to have changed Bai Changchun's mind. He, who had never accepted disciples, accepted him as his disciple. Furthermore, he had already hinted that he would be the next torture enforcer. Did Bai Changchun think that his achievements in the future would be higher than Wen Lanfeng's? Even Yu Qianqiu didn't believe this reason. He was an expert at the late soul formation stage. He thought about it until his scalp went numb. He couldn't figure out what the old man wanted, so he simply stopped thinking about it. Maybe he was worrying too much. Master didn't have so many plans at all. Otherwise, he would have killed all the soul formation experts. But he was very sure of one thing. Master was determined to go to the Holy East Land. Once he left the cultivation world, all the countries would definitely join forces to attack the cultivation world of Huaxia. Not only the cultivation world, but the secular world would also experience a great calamity. A war to divide the interests of Huaxia was inevitable. At that time, the world would be in chaos. After understanding the general situation, Yu Qianqiu calculated that it would not be long before his master left for the Eastern Holy Land. He immediately felt that he was pressed for time. There was only 1 or 2 years left, which was nothing for the long life of a cultivator. But for him, it was really urgent. In 1 or 2 years, once the cultivation world of Huaxia was defeated, if he didn't have enough strength to operate in the cultivation world and support Shi Wenguang's army would be the first to bear the brunt. Although the cultivation world wouldn't directly intervene, if the armies of hundreds of countries joined forces, no matter how good Shi Wenguang was at fighting, it would be hard for him to deal with them. His years of hard work would go down the drain. Yu Qianqiu sat on the chair and smiled bitterly. To be honest, before leaving the cultivation world of Huaxia, he didn't care much about who won or lost. But now, for the sake of his own interests, he couldn't let the cultivation world of Huaxia defeat them. He had to help them even if he didn't want to. Regardless of what his master was thinking, he had to prepare for a rainy day and make preparations just in case. In the next 1 or 2 years, he had to weaken the strength of the countries as much as possible. Thinking of this, he took out a red spirit pill and played with it in his hand. When he first refined the pseudo-limit-breaking pill, it was prepared for the Daluo sect. But now, it seemed that the Daluo sect was a force that couldn't be ignored in the cultivation world of Huaxia. So there was no hurry to deal with them. This pseudo-limit-breaking pill might have to be used on someone else. As he pondered, he sat on the chair until the next day, when Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing forcefully increased their cultivation to the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. The two of them stood up excitedly. Roar! They couldn't help but let out 2 clear roars, causing the room to buzz. Under the grapevines outside, the 6 women were wondering why the 3 men were hiding in the room for an entire day. Could it be that they were gay? When they suddenly heard the 2 clear roars, their expressions changed. From the deafening roars, they could tell that the cultivation of the 2 people who made the sounds was much higher than theirs. When did other people enter the room? In the ghost manner, many wandering cultivators looked over. Yu Qianqiu leaned back on the chair and looked at the 2 of them with half-opened eyes. He smiled slightly. It was understandable how the 2 of them felt. Anyone who spent a day to break through from the foundation establishment stage to the tribulation passing stage would be overjoyed. They had seen many similar things in Utopia. Of course, it was a good thing. But what the two of them didn't know was that they basically had no chance of breaking through to the soul formation stage in this lifetime. He didn't know if the two of them would have other thoughts after they found out. Therefore, Yu Qianqiu didn't tell the two of them about the drawbacks of the purple limit-breaking pill. Yu Qianqiu knew that he might be a little unreasonable, but his way of thinking might be a little cruel to others. His reasoning was very simple. The two of them were wandering cultivators with mediocre aptitudes. If they hadn't met him, in this chaotic cultivation world, what chance would they have of increasing their cultivation to the early stage of the tribulation passing stage in this lifetime? The chance was probably zero, not to mention cultivating to the soul formation stage. That's right, he wanted to use the two of them. So he took out a few million spirit stones to increase their cultivation to the tribulation passing stage. However, Yu Qianqiu thought that this was an opportunity for them. Others might not have this opportunity. Some things might make people unhappy if they were too clear about it. For their own good, his own good and mine, it was better to hide it. He thought that this kind of concealment was rational and kind. How's the effect? Are there any adverse effects on your body? Check it carefully. Yu Qianqiu leaned his arm on the tea table, his head half propped up as he smiled. The two of them nodded and quickly checked their bodies. Apart from the damage caused by forcefully increasing their cultivation, they were fine. Boss, there's no problem. Fu Chun clenched her fists and said excitedly. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that such a day would come. Boss, there's no problem with me either. Qin Jiaxing kept rubbing his face with his palms. He was indescribably excited. Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled as he looked at the two of them checking their cultivation. After a while, the two of them calmed down a little. Fu Chun brought the storage bag over respectfully and said, Boss, there's still about 800,000 high-grade spirit stones. Qin Jiaxing didn't dare to keep it to himself and brought it over respectfully. Yu Qianqiu sat up straight and waved his hand with a smile. I'm an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator now. I'm no longer a poor itinerant cultivator. How can I not have some money? Keep it for yourself. The two of them were a little embarrassed. Qin Jiaxing scratched his head and giggled. This was happiness. In the past, they were just poor itinerant cultivators. I still stand by my words. As long as you follow me sincerely, I guarantee that you'll have a good life. Yu Qianqiu stood up and patted their shoulders. Help me do things well. Good days are yet to come. The two of them didn't know what to say. They just kept nodding and giggling. After I made my move last night, I'm sure many itinerant cultivators will come to fawn over you. Yu Qianqiu walked around the two of them and said, if they find out that you're early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators, they'll be even more envious. You can tell everyone about the limit-breaking pill. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.